welcome to the select meeting for Tuesday, March 1st. It's hard to believe it's March already. We've turned the corner, hopefully, with winter, getting toward the end. Any announcements from my colleagues?
I want to remind people that today is Election Day. It's presidential
yes.
primary, and people have 45 minutes to vote before the polls close. So I know how riveting these hearings are, but try and rip yourself away from the Selectmen's meeting and go vote if you haven't done so already.
I voted early, but only the time that's supposed to.
Did you
Number
vote
of times.
often?
No, I said only the number of times I was supposed to.
Anyone signed up for public comment? Nope. Okay, let's move on to our miscellaneous calendar. The minutes of February 23rd, I have a tiny change. Anyone
No,
else? Okay, I will move acceptance of the minutes as amended. All those in favor, Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. And the next item is a question of accepting a reimbursement grant in the amount of up to $46,500 from the federal fiscal year 2014 Urban Area Security Initiative for the Brookline Emergency Management Team to be used at the Brookline Senior Center for the installation of a generator docking station. Wow, there's a lot of words.
I'm sorry to have you say that, because the chief's not here. I'll get him, but maybe you could take
Okay,
it.
I'll move
Well,
on.
I think
first.
this one, I think this one is pretty obvious. The senior center has been designated as a shelter in the event of an emergency. And this would just get them all set up so that one of the town's portable generators could be plugged in there very quickly if there was that sort of emergency and no power for that use as a place for people to gather. So it seems like a wonderful use of the money. Very happy that the Urban Areas Security Initiative is willing to give us the $46,500 for that purpose.
Go ahead.
I'm comfortable voting it, but the chief would like to say more than what Selectman Daley explained. And Selectman Daley's also explained that the senior center has been designated as a shelter, and then this allows for the setup, necessary electrical setups, so we can plug in our generator should the need arise. Anything to add?
No, the only thing I would add is this is the next step in a series of town buildings that we've been able to obtain the funding for to get these hookups ready in case we have to utilize them.
Okay.
So we've got the equipment already. This is just to enable the connection.
Yes, and we have the generators as well. The portable generators stored up at the DPW.
How many portable generators do we have?
2,
Okay.
but we have access to more depending on the need in the URC region.
Oh, okay. But if everybody else, if there was an area-wide emergency, we probably would only have our 2, right?
Yes, but some of the buildings have the generators
Okay.
already, but this would allow for that.
Because I'm just wondering, just food for thought, not that we have to hash it out tonight, but maybe we need another portable generator or 2.
Okay. I know what you're saying.
Well, I mean, if you designate places as shelters, but then they wouldn't have, the senior center is not the only place.
No.
And only so many people could fit in there. So I assume we have some others, maybe the high school or?
Yeah, we hook up portable generators at the high school too to enhance what they have.
Yeah.
And then public safety building has a generator. And
That's a built-in generator.
that's a built-in generator, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Therefore, I'll move that we accept this reimbursement grant in the amount of up to $46,500 from the federal fiscal year 2014 Urban Area Security Initiative for the Brookline Emergency Management Team to be used at the Brookline Senior Center for the installation of a generator, docking station, an emergency electrical panel, and an electrical transfer switch. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next item is the question of approving and executing an agreement with Abe Faber, Market Co-Manager for the operation of the Farmers Market at the Center Street West parking lot on Thursdays from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. from June 2nd through November 17th. And this is a sure harbinger of that winter
Spring
is on its way out. Mr. Martineau, are you, talk to us about this?
Evening. So the market's entering its 22nd year in operation, third year under the trio of new market managers since Arlene Flowers retired a few years ago. So it's Abe, and then a couple of the vendors have gotten together to keep the market going. And they've, for the last couple of years, have been employing a market manager to help them with the day-to-day operations, including an additional staff person to help them with the SNAP program, which was a success last year. So all of us that enjoy and support the market, we're pleased with that. This year, the big change is they polled their customers and vendors about extending the length of the season, so 2 weeks up front and 3 weeks on the back end. And the response was pretty overwhelming in favor of expanding the market season, both amongst the patrons and vendors. It aligns the season, the market season with other area markets. It also works well for the vendors in their growing season. And so no one on the town side at the staff level had any issues with it. And so we're here asking for your approval to support that this year.
And I presume the license agreement is the same, language
Yep,
as
we
years
use the same
past.
agreement every year, but we change the dates, and I always run it by town council just to make sure that all
Okay.
the i's are dotted and t's are crossed, so.
Any comments, questions?
No, I just want to note for people that until this opens, the winter farmers market is still going on. I was shopped there on Sunday, and it was surprising how much stuff they had. You think in the winter, but there's like the root vegetables, and I got shiitake mushrooms there and stuff. So that is in the arcade building.
Okay, and being that there's no other questions, I'll move that we approve and execute an agreement with Abe Faber, Market Co-Manager for the operation of the Farmers Market at the Center Street West parking lot on Thursdays from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., June 2nd through November 17th, 2016. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Oops. I looked at Selectman Franco and said Selectman Green. Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, since Selectman Green.
We
Thank
both have the same haircut.
Yeah. That's-
I've been called much worse, believe me.
So have I.
Selectman Green is thinking, finally, I get to vote in
Next item, we're ready to move on to our main calendar. It's the question of offering conditional employment to 12 applicants, I believe it's 12, right? For position as police officers. Chief O'Leary.
Good evening again. My pleasure to come back to you tonight to do the next step in the hiring process of 12 candidates for the Brookline Police Department. As you know, a couple of months ago, I came and asked for permission to go ahead and start the hiring process to fill our vacancies at the time. And we did. We got the list from Civil Service. So far in the process, we've gone through the applications, the background investigations, the orientation, which included some testing that they had gone through. And the past couple of weeks, they were undergoing the oral panel that included members of the police department and members from the town's HR department. And from that list, we came up with a group of 12 people that you see in front of you now, with a little write-up on each one of them. And what I'm asking tonight is that we can offer them conditional offers of employment, which will allow us to take them to the next steps, which will be their physical examinations, psychological examinations, and then their physical abilities test, which is put on by the state. If all of that is successfully passed by them, I'll come back to the board and ask the board to appoint them as student officers for the May, end of May Police Academy that's being held in Lowell.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment. It seems that almost all of these people have significant nexus to Brookline, which is really nice. They've either worked here, they've gone to school here, they were raised here. So that's always, I think, good, especially when we take our own graduates. And, you know, that makes all of us happy about.
Yeah, which is good. Plus, there's several of them in here that had worked in the police station as co-op students. And they've established residencies here since their employment with us and while they were attending Northeastern or just after they graduated.
Yeah, well, I think that's great.
Yeah. I'd also like to add, well, first of all, thank you for doing the write-up. I don't know if you do that all the time, but it's very helpful in terms of getting an understanding of the type of people that we are recruiting. And also on the co-op program, I mean, that seems to be the type of program that would really be helpful in expanding the diversity of our pool of potential applicants to the police department and other departments. I mean, I'm sure that the Northeastern program, as well as other programs around the country, would provide maybe access to access to potential employees that would be different from, you know, the sort of normal run-of-the-mill people that we may be recruiting. So I do understand that we take advantage of those co-op programs, and I just want to commend the town for doing that.
Well, thank you. We think it's a great program. We employ 3 of them each semester that Northeastern's in class. So.
I might also add that there is significant diversity here. You know, I think 4 of the 12 are members of a minority group, and there are also several women, so
Yes.
that's great.
And then last time, I think we hired 7 and there was no women involved. I think we have about 5 women with this group now.
Any other comments, questions? Therefore, I'll move that we offer conditional employment to the following applicants for positions as police officers, and I will apologize up front if I mispronounce any of the names. Granny D. Mosna?
Grania.
Okay, so there, I'm starting not well. Nicholas C. Goon, Audrey K. Underwood, Kerry C. Cavani, Christopher Elcock,
Keaveney.
Keaveney. I should know that.
You should know
too.
that one, yeah.
Because they live in my neighborhood. Christopher Elcock, Brian Merrigan, Michael Mitzek, Stephen Burke, James Goff, David Pilgrim, Megan Keaveney, and Michelle Slavin. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And next item is the question of authorizing the filling of the following vacancies in the police department: deputy superintendent, lieutenant, and sergeant. Chief?
Yes, at the end of this month, one of our current deputy superintendents, John O'Leary, who's been with the department for about 34 years, will be retiring. He's reaching the age of retirement, 65 years old, at the end of this month. So with that, there's an opening within the deputy superintendent's rank, of which, as you know, it's a newer rank that we made within the past year. And we select from our current 10 lieutenants who's going to fill that slot. When we fill that position, which is the deputy superintendent's position, it creates an opening in the lower ranks, which will be our lieutenant and our sergeants. And those lists, the hiring is made from lists that are established based on the civil service exams. And those lists are currently in effect, and they'll remain in effect for about another year. So we'll request a list from civil service and move forward with filling all 3 vacancies at the same time.
Do you have a sense of how large the applicant pool is going to be? How many officers have taken the sergeant's test or the lieutenant's test?
Well, the pool that we selected deputy chief from
Right.
will be the largest. There's 10 current lieutenants, and they'll be from the ranks of lieutenants, so all 10 are eligible to apply. When you get into civil service, the field gets narrowed to the top 3 that are on each list.
Okay.
So there's 3 for lieutenant, 3 for sergeant.
So the answer is 3.
Yes. But it's useful information
Right.
for the public to know and for us to know that we're really forced to choose between the top 3 scores on the promotion exam. It's
Yes.
not as though we can sort of go in and cherry pick any of the patrol officers to go to sergeant or any of the sergeants to go to lieutenant. Our hands are tied to some extent.
Based on civil service rules, yes.
Correct.
But I thought your question was, are you getting a reasonable number of people taking the exam for the next higher rank?
We're getting less people taking the promotional exams. The exam of sergeant is the most critical one, I think, because then people get into the hiring process. We are not getting the same amount of people taking the sergeant's test as we have in the past. I think last time we only got 18 candidates to take the exam. And say, when I first took the exam back several decades ago, we were getting about 70-plus people to take the test back then.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Therefore, I'll move that we authorize the filling of the following vacancies in the police department: deputy superintendent, lieutenant, and sergeant. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, right, okay. We have a couple of interviews for the Bottled Water Study Committee. Is Nate Tucker here? Come on up and join us.
To the podium, yes.
Lahotzi.
Why don't you tell us about yourself and your interest in the issue and why you want to join it, join the committee?
My name's Nate Tucker. I live at 21 Bowker Street and across the way. And
Speak into the mic.
Sorry, thanks. And my wife and I moved there about 3 years ago. We have a year-and-a-half-old daughter and a dog. We're both teachers. I'm a middle school teacher in the Boston Public School System. And I've been living here and hoping to get involved with the community in some way. And this presented itself, or I've stumbled across it. And I understand there's a very specific charge by the board to as to what to do with this, as far as looking into more information and coming up with the results of that information. I feel it's pretty well defined, so that this seems to me a way that I could help with the town in advancing one particular small issue.
Sure, and I'm glad to see a new face,
Well, thanks.
and it's a good way to get into seeing what town government is all about with a committee that has a finite charge and hopefully won't go on too long, and then you can get a taste and see if you want to get involved deeper, and I hope you would. Selectman Green?
Well, also a committee that introduces you to a lot of issues across the town beyond just the bottled water question. Infrastructure, paying for infrastructure improvements, et cetera. So give me a sense of why you're interested in this committee.
Well, actually, not to diminish it, because that's true, it's defined, but not, there's still quite a bit involved. I understand that the Department of Public Works and I understand your recommendation to find out from the commissioner the specifics that would be involved. It seems like an opportunity, as you said. I'm not the most articulate in front of a group of, well, strangers, frankly, sorry. But
You're making some assumptions.
Oh,
No, I'm just kidding.
I do that too often, too. But it seems to me, when I was looking for ways to get involved, this was a distinct way. I understand that there are many factors involved, and it has a huge implication. It's part of a broader issue, certainly. And as a member of this town specifically, I feel as though there are tremendous topics that sort of pivot off of this or spiral out of this, and but I do feel like that's a specific sort of roadmap to whatever the end is. But frankly, when I was trying to pursue an opportunity, this was one of the limited opportunities.
Sure. Okay.
I'm wondering, just one more question. I'm wondering, you're a science teacher in Boston, you teach in grades 7 to 8, and I'm wondering how much you incorporate environmental issues in your science curriculum.
That is one of the core sort of cross-sectional concepts that are incorporated in virtually every component of the curriculum in some aspect, such as just as energy is a cross-cutting concept. It's difficult to address the issue without overwhelming the recipient at such an early age, such a big topic, but the impact, the benefit that one receives from the environment and the impact one has on the environment, the relationships is a fundamental component of science, I believe, and we study ecosystems in discrete finite models and then broader contexts. We construct artificial ecosystems and look at variables in that and sustainability, and but then also how ecosystems relate on a broader context. And ecology is tremendously important, and frankly, there'd be a selfish component here. I would be able to incorporate this into my classroom instruction. So, not necessarily the specifics, but the concept. So, it's a great way to make it a personal and humanizing.
Selectman Daley.
connection.
Yeah, I think that the warrant article that, at a prior town meeting that kind of kicked off this impetus for this committee, people were interested in limiting the number of plastic bottles around, but there's also, I currently am on a no-sugar diet myself, and I worry about kids getting sugary drinks, so, if there's a restriction on, I don't think we should be eliminating water, and, so that kids only have options of sugary drinks. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I absolutely agree, and I go I'll share my, I feel as though statements are extremely important. The logistics and the financing that might be involved with operating, I'm going a little bit farther than your direct question, I'm sorry. I agree that if you eliminate water, you risk providing, or sort of, in a way, forcing other options. I do think there's a parent component involved at some point with choices. I also wouldn't want to limit an individual's choice. When I think about the logistics and the police, the notion of enforcing somebody walking across the town line with a bottle of water, I understand the difference between commercially selling it versus possessing it.
I don't even think the proponents of limiting the number of water bottles ever got so far as to say they were going to stop people at the border.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Excuse me if I could be personal, I also got in a car crash this morning, so I'm shaking a little more than normal. I
Okay.
apologize.
Oh, my gosh.
You're fine, don't worry about it.
Everybody's okay.
Good, good.
One of the issues that came up when this warrant article was first dealt with by town meeting and that made its way into the charge of the committee was sort of an investigation of public infrastructure and the availability of water stations and water fountains. And I'm wondering if you could sort of comment on your experience as the father of a young child now as to whether our parks have water fountains, if our public spaces have adequate water bottle filling stations. What's your impression of baseline, where we stand today?
For my personal, I can visualize where they exist, and I understand, and I believe I read somewhere, I haven't memorized this, I'm sorry, but that there was a concern about the need for updating or fixing any malfunctioning or non-functioning existing water sources, public water sources, as well as possibly people asking for the addition of new. I feel as though there's a water source for consumption at every public space that I've been to in Brookline. I haven't been to that many, but I mean, I haven't been to them all, excuse me. I've been to a number at this point with my daughter. But I feel as though there's a water fountain there. There's also opportunity for water elsewhere, in the home, or bring it with you. But I understand that from a public works perspective, that might be somebody has raised that as a concern, or and that's one of the considerations I see, the cost of that versus the cost of banning it. But I see a water fountain everywhere I go, including the sprinklers for the kids to play in. And
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Thank you, Mr. Tucker, and I believe we're making appointments later this evening, so you'll be hearing from us shortly.
okay,
Thank
thank you
you.
all very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
You know, I just want to point out that there are no women on the list who have applied to be on this committee, and maybe we ought to hold the appointments for 1 week, because I believe Selectman Green was going to try to solicit a little more diversity on this committee.
We're actually not scheduled to do appointments for this committee tonight.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, maybe we are. I take it back. It's hiding
Yeah,
under another
yeah.
agenda item.
So, yeah, we could hold it. It's-
Well, we can vote the charge, but. I
Right,
mean,
okay.
I think that.
Mr. Fisher, I see you're here. Tell us about your interest, though
I think I'll get right.
get right to it.
Andrew Fisher, town meeting member, precinct 13, and but I'm a bit troubled by the notion, and getting right into my interest here, about the notion that banning plastic bottles is banning water. And I think that that's sort of looking at things the wrong way. Well, if we ban water, people will have to buy sweetened drinks. If we make water free, people won't be tempted to buy water, sweetened drinks. And I think the notion, I think one of the things that we need to separate, that I think the people, myself included, who brought the plastic bottle limitations allowed to be misunderstood, is that this is not about banning water. It's about freeing water and making water free and available. And I think that the idea is, I mean, when I was a kid, every playground had a water cooler. Every school outside of every classroom had a water cooler, and nobody had to pay for water. And I think what this is about, what troubles me, is the privatization of one of the basic elements that we need to survive. And on top of it, the privatization is doing it in a way that's creating waste that is proliferating, that is not biodegradable, that is not salvageable, and that is threatening to endanger the ecology. This is not about limiting people's access to water. It's about liberating people's access to water so that they don't have to pay Coca-Cola, who's figured out, well, people aren't buying enough Coke anymore, so we'll sell Dasani, and make people pay for what used to be free. And I think I've cut right to the chase as to what the problem is,
Yeah.
or what my agenda is.
Selectman Green.
Okay. Thank you for cutting to the chase on that. I don't think anyone on this board or at town meeting last year really opposed reducing the use of bottled water or consumption of bottled water. We all acknowledge that that is a negative thing in many ways. I think what I'd like to get a response from you on is, how do you respond to the situation in Flint, Michigan, an extreme example, or the situation in Maynard, Massachusetts recently, where the public water system failed and bottled water was the way that people were kept alive?
Well, bottled water doesn't
And I guess my question is, well, continue.
I can start with Flint, Michigan, which is where the horror stories, I mean, Flint, Michigan has to do with the privatization of water, which taking the government from the control of the elected officials and putting it in the hands of appointed people who had a privatization agenda. And what's interesting is, as this comes out from Flint, Michigan, that long before the families were told that their children are drinking poisoned water, the General Motors facility was being given bottled water, and other people who knew about the problems with the water were being given bottled water. So I think Flint is an example of how not to do this. We have a remarkably wonderful public water system regionally.
Which sometimes has problems, for example, in Maynard.
There are ways to distribute water other than in single-use containers. There are 5-gallon drums, there are water trucks, there are ways that, I mean, water was distributed in these kind of emergency situations for many years without using single-use containers that are not biodegradable, not recyclable, not, the only thing that can be done with them is to let them enter into the ocean and cause harm to the ecology in the long run. There are other ways to distribute water. Like I said, there are 5-gallon drums. There are, in fact, the kind of 5-gallon plastic containers are not destructive to the environment the same way as single-use bottles, plastic bottles. Have I answered your question?
No, I think that is an answer to the question. Yeah, I mean, the purpose of the committee is to figure out ways, and that would be one example of reducing the use of those single-use plastic bottles in a way that is not approaching it from a command economy standpoint. We want to educate, I would like to educate people so that they understand those alternatives, and so that, you know, the use of single portion bottled water is limited to those emergency situations where, you know, any other alternatives are not feasible. So I think we're on the same wavelength. It's just, you know,
I think
maybe
so.
the emphasis.
I would take the education one step further. I would want the town to have water available on such a broad scale that the education component would be that people would have a presumption that they're entitled to water and shouldn't have to pay for it. I mean, we pay for it another way. We pay for it through the Commonweal. We pay for it because we have a water system, because we have a reservoir that feeds us and protects us with safe water, and we've all paid for that collectively. And we shouldn't allow we shouldn't allow private entities to bottle that water and sell it back to us. It already belongs to us. And that should be the presumption that people think of.
Any other questions, comments? So we're not going to be making the appointments tonight. So we'll get going next week, and then this committee's going to have to hit the ground running.
Fast.
Yeah, fast, because it's supposed to make at least a preliminary report to this coming town meeting. So I suspect it'll be a preliminary report.
Could I make one recommendation to the board? And there is a recent book out called Let There Be Water, which is about how Israel, which was built out of the desert, has conquered the water problem in Israel such that they have more water than they need at an affordable manner. And one of the positives out of the book is that water will be the way, using water collectively will be the way that countries build relationships that are positive and not destructive. I'm kind of proud of the book in that my son was one of the, is in the acknowledgments as having been edited several of the chapters. He's an engineer specializing in water, living in Israel now. But it's a wonderful book about the future of water and how we address it.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a public hearing for a proposal for 40B project at 40 Center Street. And this is the third, I believe, in a series of 40B projects that have come before us in the last couple of months, and I believe we've just had one more apply at 420 Harvard Street, and we're going to be having a hearing on that proposal probably in 2 weeks. March 15th, 2 weeks. 40B allows a developer to bypass our zoning if the developer pledges generally 20% or more of the units for affordable housing. 40B applies to a community such as Brookline until there are a number of triggers where we hit the safe harbor. The one most people know about is the trigger where 10% of a community's housing stock appears in the state-subsidized housing inventory. And we're approaching that 10%, and I suspect that as we approach the 10%, we're seeing this, I'm thinking about it as a tsunami of 40B proposals, and this being one of them. So the purpose of this hearing is the developer has to apply to a subsidizing agency for what's called a project eligibility letter, a PEL. And the Board of Selectmen is asked to provide some initial comments to the subsidizing agency so the subsidizing agency can consider our comments as they make their decision on whether they're going to subsidize the project. This is the first of a long process regarding 40B, a 40B project. And we're also soliciting responses from our various departments, and the planning department will probably have some comments, the building department, DPW, et cetera. But this is the public's opportunity to tell us what your concerns are. And let me just say what we're not going to be talking about tonight is design. You know, what should the building be wood or brick? You know, that would come at a later point. What we will be talking about, and what I really hope to hear from the public is comments on the concept. Is it too big? Is there enough parking? What's going to be the effect on the neighborhood? What's going to be the effect on the abutting parcels? Those are the kinds of comments that I and I'm sure that the other members of the board would really like to hear, so that we can formulate our response and have your comments considered as we formulate our response. The way we've been doing it, for the past 2 hearings, this is the 3rd, is we've had either the developer or someone from the planning department kind of lay the foundation, tell us what the project is all about. And then we'd have questions from the board, and then we open it up to public comment. I'm just curious, just to get a sense of the room, how many people are going to wish to speak? If just raise your hand. So it's a fair number. So what I'm going to do, just so that we're not here till midnight, I'm going to suggest that we have a 3-minute time limit. So really think about what you want to say. And also, what I would suggest too is, if somebody has made one of the points that you've that you want to make, it's really okay to say, I agree with so and so. I have an additional point, and I think that you'll find that's a better use of your time. People have responded very positively to that kind of doing a public hearing in that manner, and it's worked well in the past. So I guess I'm going to suggest that either Ms. Selko or Ms. Steinfeld just start us off, and
Good evening. I'm Polly Selko, Assistant Director of Regulatory Planning. And this proposal is to demolish a 2-story building that is directly opposite the large Center Street parking lot. They want to build a 6-story residential building with 45 units, 36 which will be market rate, and 9 would be affordable. The residences would be on the 2nd through 6th floor, and on the 1st floor there would be parking. And tonight, their team is here, and although the developer is not here, Bob Roth, because he's out of the country, but Peter Bartosh from Cube 3, which is the architectural firm, is going to give you an overview. And Bob Engler is their 40B consultant, and he's here too.
okay. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Peter Bartash. I'm with Cube 3 Studio. We're the architecture firm that is designing the project for Mr. Roth. Thank you, Chairman and members of the board, for being here tonight to have our presentation. I'm just going to go ahead and get it set up here, and then we'll walk right through it.
Go right ahead. Do what you need to do.
So tonight, as we take a look at the project here, we're going to do a few things. I'd like to orient you to the site, get you familiar with the existing conditions, walk through the basic plan of the building, and then take a look briefly at just the proposed architecture, the elevations, to kind of orient you to the overall concept of what we're proposing here. So here in this first slide, what we're looking at is an overall aerial that shows the greater surrounding context. The red rectangle here represents 40 Center Street. You'll notice the municipal lot across Center Street that sits behind the theater at the corner and to the back side of the buildings that front Harvard Street. On the screen here running left to right, we have Beacon Street, and you'll also see Shaler Street, Wellman Street that all feed into Center Street. On the next slide here, what we've done is an analysis of height for the surrounding context in the area of this project. Anything in yellow that you see is 6 or more stories. For instance, this building here is 9 stories. This building here, I believe, is 10 stories in the upper left-hand corner at William Street and Center Street. And then anything in orange you see is from 4 to 5 stories. So we're starting to look at the neighborhood here and start to try to understand the overall datum for height within the surrounding context. Another important piece of analysis as part of our observations on the site is looking at the way that buildings front streets in this general area. And so we're looking at locations where buildings are set back from the back of the sidewalk versus set right up against the edge of the sidewalk as a way of reinforcing the urban condition. And as you can see along Harvard Ave, we have most, if not all, buildings that are set right up against the back of that sidewalk in a very urban, walkable, retail-oriented condition. And as we move into the neighborhoods here, we start to see that buildings step back and further away from the street, anywhere from 5 to 10 feet from that back of the sidewalk. And so right here, the existing building you can see is roughly 10 to 12 feet back from the back side of the sidewalk along Center Street. So we're looking a little bit more closely at the proposed project site. You'll see 19 Winchester Street is that 9-story building that sits directly behind the project site. 32 Center Street is a 2.5-story existing building immediately to the east of the project site. Running top to bottom here is Center Street. Again, there's the municipal lot. And this right here is the footprint of the existing 2-story building that sits on the site. And for the purposes of people who may not be familiar with the site, the general boundary runs almost up to the edge of 32 Center Street, back to a wall that sits at the very rear of the parking lot, and then up to another boundary that's along a vegetated edge that separates this parcel from the parking lot to the west. And in all cases, when we're looking at these plans, the lower right-hand corner of the screen is roughly south, and so your sun is sweeping up and around the screen here and projecting shadows into the parking lot, out onto the street, and then at the very end of the day, across the corner of 32 Center Street here. So this is the existing 2-story building. As you can see, the site and the sidewalk, they're heavily vegetated. These trees along this edge are sitting against the parking lot here, and we do have some street trees that front right up along the edge of Center Street. And again, we're looking at a building that's set roughly 10 to 12 feet back from the edge of the sidewalk. And in the left-hand corner of the image here, you can see the access point to the drive aisle that leads to the parking lot behind the existing building. So this is a rendering of the proposed building. And so you'll see right here on the left of the image, this is that 2.5-story building that exists at 32 Center Street. This is the lot on the right-hand side, that is the parking lot, and then you'll see the 9-story building in the back. So as Polly alluded to, we are proposing a 6-story building here. It's 5 floors of residential over 1 floor of parking. At this front corner of the building, we're looking at an active lobby, an active area for residents to enter and be engaged as they come into the building. This is where building management is going to be located, right in this front corner. It puts that activity right up on the street edge and lets the parking enter into an access point to the garage on the left-hand side here of the image and back behind and underneath the building. For the purposes of understanding how this building is constructed, this is using the Type 3A construction type. So what we see is a non-combustible podium, which is defined as an S2 use. It's storing parking and cars. And then there's a 3-hour separation from the building above. And this building above is 5 floors of wood framing that are designed to meet all state and local building codes related to fire protection for the use of wood frame in this type of construction. The building is protected throughout with an NFPA 13 sprinkler system. And all bearing walls and partitions and exterior bearing walls are rated based on the code and also based on their proximity to the property lines. So all of those factors have been taken into account as we've gone through the process of designing this building, recognizing that life safety and fire safety are of extreme importance for a building of this type. I'll talk a little bit more about the language as we get further on, but I just want to keep going through some of the basics here. So, as Polly mentioned, we do have 45 units. 11% of those units are studios, and they're averaging a little bit over 460 square feet each. The one-bed units are slightly below 700 square feet each, and we have 44% one-bed units. The two-bed units are roughly 960 square feet each, and they're working out to be 33% of the units. And we do have a series of three-bed units that are required by 40B regulations, and they're at roughly 1,240 square feet, and they account for 11% of the total mix. In terms of gross square footage, we're looking at almost 46,000 square feet of gross feet for the residential portion of the project. And when you include the garage, you're at roughly 52,500 square feet total for the project, which amounts to an FAR of roughly 4.27. So looking at the first floor plan of our proposed building, again, this is Center Street on the right-hand side of the page. Here is that access point to the garage we talked about, which is in the location of the existing curb cut. I do want to point out that the existing building sits roughly back where my pointer is here, so at the back side of the vestibule and the leasing area. And so we're actually proposing that the building step forward closer to the back of the sidewalk by between 6 and 8 feet than what's there currently in the existing condition. Here's your primary residential entry point, and you do have your leasing here with your elevator access, a stair, and all of your trash and machine rooms that serve some of these back-of-house functions. You have your drive aisle with your 17 total parking spaces here, one of which will be van accessible. You have some other support rooms in the back of the project, and then a stair at the other end of the corridor. And when we get up to the upper floors, you'll see that. We also have this area that's dedicated for bike parking. And again, to just point out, right here, this dashed line you see around the plan, this is the extent of the property line. So we're proposing a 5-foot, 1-inch setback from the property line on the side and rear of the project. And so this is just telling you where those entry points where we just talked about, where some of those programmatic uses are, where the vertical circulation cores are, and you'll see those as we move up through the building. So when we move up into the first residential floor, you'll see that we have a center corridor, which is double loaded, meaning that it has units on either side. You can see we have our 3-bed unit here in the corner, so we can take advantage of the exterior wall exposure to get light into all of our bedrooms and into our living space. You have your elevator again and your stairs that are captured at the end of, that capture the ends of this corridor. As you move up through in some of the upper levels, this is the 3rd through 6th floor, you'll see areas where we've started to cut away at the exterior and integrated balconies for some of the upper floor units. And the purpose of these balconies is to help this building read more as a residential building and to add that as an amenity for the residents. So here's an example of a typical 1-bed unit where if this bottom of the screen were your corridor, you would have your entry door that gets you into your combined living space, which has a living room at one end and your kitchen at the other with a bar seating so it feels open and engaging. And you open this door and you see out to a window and out to natural light. And then separate from that, you have your bedroom with a walk-in closet, in-unit washer dryer, and then a full bathroom with shower or tub, toilet, your sink, and then a small linen closet.
Yeah, just let me, we're not as so interested in the design details of each unit, but more the concepts. So I don't think you need to tell us, about the living room and the bathroom and so much. So
No, sure.
keep moving.
Yep, I'll keep moving through. So we'll look at the elevation real quick, and then we'll turn it over to questions. So the concept here is to use a contemporary design language and traditional materials to create a building that has references to some of the detailing and some of the other aspects of buildings we see in the area, especially along some of Beacon Street and along Harvard Street, and then to reinterpret those in a way that helps manage the scale and mass of the building. And I'm not going to say any more than that about the detail. I just wanted to give you the general idea here.
Mm-hmm.
So here we're looking at one of the side elevations. This is the rear elevation. And then we're looking at the other side of the elevation here as well. So that concludes just the architecture presentation. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to open it up to the board. I have a few questions. So first, this 45 units, where's everyone going to park?
So, actually, it's a fantastic question. And it does come up, so
Now, keep in mind that as a matter of public policy, town meeting has decided that every project since pretty much 2000, when this parking ordinance was passed, every project should have parking on site for all the units all the cars that the project generates. So, you know, while 40B lets you slide a bit, here, for this kind of project, you would need at least, under normal zoning, 90-plus cars.
That's
So you're
correct.
proposing 17 spaces, so that's 18%. So that's one space for almost every 3 apartments. So where's everyone going to park here?
So the way that we look at parking here, what you just pointed out is the zoning compliant approach to providing parking. And the way that Brookline zoning breaks it down is 2 spaces per unit. Doesn't matter what unit type it is. So it doesn't matter if it's a 3-bed unit, 2-bed, or 1 or studio. What we've seen as a function of looking across the industry is that the actual utilization rates of parking vary depending on unit type. And so in this project, because it is subject to the 40B requirements, we are required to do the larger 3-bed unit. But the first move that we've made is to greatly control the size of the 1-bed and studio apartments to gear them more toward people who are interested in utilizing public transit. And so we are very close to connectivity with the Green Line. This is a walkable location. We do have bike parking that's provided on site. And we also look at precedent for other projects that we've seen in town here that we've been a part of in town too. Most notably over at 45 Marion Street. That project was proposed and approved at a parking ratio of roughly 0.21 spaces per unit, I believe. And so in this location, as we're looking at a balance between units and parking, we're trying to maximize the efficiency of the space that we're providing as a function of getting the affordable units we need, but also maximizing the parking layout here. And the 17 is a number that we arrive at as a constraint of the site.
So I'd like to ask someone from the planning staff, have we approved, have there been any projects approved with this low parking ratio?
Well, he is correct that Marion Street was approved with a low parking ratio, but keep in mind that the units were much smaller. There were no 3 bedrooms, I think, and there were a lot of studios and 1s.
Can you give me again the number of 3 bedrooms plus 2 bedrooms?
Sure.
It's 5 3-bedrooms, 15 twos.
Okay. I mean, you know, when you have 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, those are often going to be people with kids. And, you know, many people need a car to get their kids around. Do you have any zip car proposal or anything like that to accommodate people?
So we were asked to look at that, and we did. Unfortunately, when Zipcar doesn't allow you to put a Zipcar space within a private or non-publicly accessible location, and so with this being the private garage that is security access controlled, they won't let you put a Zipcar space within the actual garage itself. And to your other point about who ends up renting these units, one of the other things that we've seen just through our experience is that projects such as these tend to be self-filtering. So if my wife and I need a place to live and we have 2 cars and this only gives us the opportunity for 1 space, if any, it's not going to be part of our consideration. We look elsewhere because it doesn't meet our needs.
Yeah, I know that the requirement that they have under 40B for 3-bedroom units is specifically to accommodate families in affordable housing. And, you know, I just think there are, I know of 1 or 2 families that manage to get by without a car when they have children, but generally speaking, that is a very challenging life, to have a couple of kids and no car at all. So I've got to say that I think if this is grossly underestimating the amount of parking that you need.
Understood.
Can I also add that, self-filtering doesn't really work in Brookline because people, when they move into an apartment without parking, will go out looking for parking spaces to rent. So you're putting pressure on those limited parking spaces, and the self-filtering concept doesn't seem to work.
I wonder if you can speak about why you haven't decided to do this as a senior development, a senior affordable housing development. It seems like, given the low ratio of parking and your desire to have self-selection, this would be a natural place to propose some senior housing.
Bob Engler for the applicant, Bob Roth, who's not here. We have discussed that because it came up at the site walk that Brookline would like to see senior housing as we are proposing on Boylston Street. It's a special market, and Bob didn't feel that he had experience with limiting it to senior housing, and didn't feel we pushed as far as we could. It's still an open question, but he's, at this point in time, not wanting to limit it that way. But let me just say, as his consultant, that that's still a subject that needs to be refined. So it's up in the air at this point in time.
So
But right now, it's not limited to senior housing.
Seniors aren't the intended market. Who is the intended market?
Well, the seniors can be the intended market. It just is not legally restricted to seniors. There's a big difference between targeting seniors and restricting seniors. So they will be targeted. The issue for the affordable units is when you're not limited to 55 and older, the affordable units will undoubtedly be, the larger ones will be family housing because it's a lottery process. Whereas if it's senior housing, even the affordable units would be designated for senior. So that's one of the differences, and there's economic issues and financial issues around that issue, but basically it's open at this point in time. But if I can go back to the parking issue, we certainly feel like the 5 3-bedroom units will get a space or more, and it'll be really, we don't expect the ones in the studios to have a parking need that we can provide, and it'll be up to the 2s to see how many people will choose to live here without the parking that they may or may not need. So, like it or not, it will be self-selecting, and we're only talking about 20-odd units in the whole town, so we feel that we'll find a market for the people that don't have that number of cars. And if Bob is wrong, he's got a problem, but we don't think that'll be the case.
Oh, could I ask a question about the parking? Was it your intention to think that people would be able to park at the Center Street lot? I noticed that the picture you put up there, you must have taken it at 6 in the morning because a lot of the spaces are empty.
Yeah, no,
but that's not usually the case.
No, that's true. We're not predicting that. But we did permit 45 Marion Street, and the parking ratio is much less than this. It's under construction. It'll be a very good test. It's not senior housing. We'll see what the parking ratio turns out to be in terms of the marketing. Who's going to live there? Polly mentioned they're smaller units, but we have 20 units out of the 45 that are studios and one. So that'll be a good test for Bob to see, as this Marion Street gets filled up, whether they're inadequately served by the parking ratio.
How many units is the Marion Street project?
65.
65. And that was in litigation for how many years?
That was litigation for a long time.
Right.
And it was switched. It was switched from from condominiums, which were 12 stories, down to 6 stories and much smaller units, and rental.
So while we have this slide up, I have a question about the garage entry point. I don't see a measurement there for the depth from the edge of the roadway to the entry point to the garage door. Do you know what that is off the top of your head?
It's roughly, I would say it's roughly 2 or 3 feet off of the property line, and the property line's right at the back of the sidewalk. So from the street, you're looking at 8 to 10 feet from the edge of the roadway. And in this case, what we would propose as a measure of encouraging and enhancing pedestrian safety is to have a warning system or a light system that's integrated with the function of the garage door to make sure that people understand when cars are coming and using that door.
And do you anticipate that there's enough room to allow a vehicle to queue up while it waits for the garage door to open? Or is that going to impede traffic on the roadway and pedestrian access across the property?
One of the things that we're going to do as a part of this process, and we'll be required to do, is a full traffic analysis and study that will talk to us about what the activity we'll be seeing is at the garage, what the potential is for queuing, how that impacts Center Street, and what those motions are. And if, for instance, if that came up as an issue, one of the things we could look to do is to shift the garage door back from the street in order to provide that queuing space on the apron itself in front of the garage. So we'll look at solutions as we start to understand the actual functionality of that intersection in a little greater detail.
So there's two issues there. I think you're right that you need a traffic study to figure out how many vehicles are going to be entering and exiting the garage. I don't, based on this schematic, I don't anticipate that you're going to be able to shift the garage door in far enough to eliminate impeding pedestrian traffic across the property line. I don't think it's possible. So that's a concern that I have.
I have a question for planning staff. There was a comment I saw from I think, a letter written by one of the neighbors or condo association about the one-year demolition delay. How does that interact with 40B? Does 40B bludgeon our demolition delay as it does zoning?
I have referred Allison Steinfeld, Planning Director, I have referred the matter to Town Council for an interpretation, but overall, if the demo permit is considered, provides a safe haven, it's for a total of 1 year for application of the comprehensive permit, not for the Pell. And it's, so from the developer's perspective, the worst case is he could not apply for a comprehensive permit until August of 2016, but we're still reviewing whether or not a demo permit is covered by this. And furthermore, even if a developer were to apply for any type of permit that were in fact a replacement, were covered by this provision, it does not prevent him from applying for for a comprehensive permit. It just shifts the burden. The ZBA is allowed to deny the permit, and it goes to the HAC, the Housing Advisory Committee, and the presumption is that the town is correct. So basically, I don't have an answer yet.
Right. So before you leave, and I don't know if this is for you or for Ms. Selko, does 40B trump all zoning, or are there reasonable controls we can put on this?
It trumps all zoning. Under 40B, the developer submits a proposal to the Zoning Board of Appeals and requests a series of waivers for relief from the zoning code. So yes, it does trump all zoning.
Okay.
Does that include things like the setbacks?
Yes.
So, you know, I know the fire chief is going to be concerned about the proximity of this building to the lot line.
The fire chief's concerns are public safety issues. They're distinct from zoning. So fire safety is a major concern, and any developer will comply with the fire chief's requirements. But in terms of...
How about the building department will also be concerned about that?
Any development is subject to the state building code, but not to the town's zoning code. So setbacks established under zoning are not relevant, other than the fact that the developer does have to identify the waivers he is seeking.
Mr. Franco?
Two final questions from me. One, this is a 6-story building, so it's roughly 60 feet tall, plus or minus a couple of feet. I didn't hear mention of where the mechanicals are going to be located. Are those anticipated to be on the roof?
Yes, they are.
So it's an additional 10-ish feet to...
No, so the tallest penetration you would have on the roof would be between 6.5 and 7 feet, and that's the elevator overrun. All of the other mechanical equipment is beneath that overall depth. Most of your residential equipment for each of the units is no more than 3.5 feet off of the roof, and is located in the center of the roof as well, away from the edges.
Okay. And then garbage and other sort of back-of-house functions. I see on this, this schematic that the main trash room is sort of located against the wall, interior to the parking. So I'm wondering how you're anticipating garbage being picked up and recycling and those types of, those matters.
Sure. So typically in this type of project, because of the size, a third-party trash vendor will be contracted to deal with trash removal, and it'll be at their discretion what size equipment they need to get trash off-site. Most commonly, it's a pickup truck, effectively, that they come and load the trash into the back of and take off-site to export. But in terms of how the building manages trash, what you are looking here is that main trash room at the ground level that you correctly identified. And directly attached to that trash room are two trash chutes that run up through the building. One is for typical household trash, and the other is for recycling. And the household trash will dump into a compactor that will cycle through and compact all that trash so it can be stored and picked up at whatever interval is necessary based on the demands of the project and the contract with that third-party vendor. So if we looked at the upper floor plan, you'll see that here's that main trash room that you access from the corridor that residents would use to manage their trash into that location.
So the anticipation is that a vehicle, potentially a pickup truck, will pull into the garage, load the trash, and then exit the garage and leave the premises.
Right, that's correct.
And it's not anticipated that a larger garbage truck will back into the garage and load that way and exit the premises.
Right. We are faced with the height limitation at that garage entry, which is, I think, what you're getting to, and also from all of the penetrations from the building above for mechanical and plumbing. And so the ideal scenario that works here is to do the truck, to have the truck that could come into the garage and pick up the trash as you're talking about. And that's a detail that I know Mr. Roth will be working out with the vendor as we get further on through the planning process.
What about recycling?
Similarly, so there are the two chutes, and one is dedicated for trash and the other is dedicated for recycling. And typically in these scenarios, that recycling is commingled. It's coming to a single storage location and picked up in a similar manner.
One of my concerns is that while the intention may be for a vehicle to enter the garage to pick up the trash, over time, there's a desire, a temptation to simply wheel out a dumpster and to place it outside of the building and have the collection occur street side rather than interior to the residence. So I'm not sure there's much we can do about it, but I will note it as a concern now and think hard about ways we can incentivize trash to be handled interior rather than curbside.
What I'd like to do, if...
I just have one more comment. It's really a comment as opposed to a question. But it's very distressing to see this beautiful, old, brick, lovely, graceful building demolished. Where have we gone in this country that we can't preserve our heritage? And we have to live with some, beg your pardon, but ugly, large thing which looms over the neighborhood. I really would ask you to please discuss this with your developer, because there are things that can be done to preserve our heritage, preserve a building that is as lovely as this without completely ruining the character of the neighborhood and tearing down this very lovely building.
What I'd like to do is open it up for public comment. And for those who wish to speak, I guess just you can line up. Sure. So I'll ask that
Thank you very much.
you start by introducing yourselves. I will also, for those of you who are following the primaries, according to the New York Times, Donald Trump has won the primary in Georgia and here in Massachusetts. And Hillary Clinton has won in Georgia and Virginia, and in Vermont, Bernie Sanders has won with 89% of the vote. Massachusetts is still too close to call on the Democratic side. For those. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Carol Murphy Edberg. I live at 19 Winchester. I'm also a trustee at 19 Winchester. This property, as it is now, abuts my property. One of the bits of information in their marketing materials says, as far as parking is concerned, it's one spot for every 2.64 individuals who are going to live in the house. I would also like to know, how do the parking spots get allocated? Who gets the parking spots and blah, blah, blah. The rear of this building is going to abut my pool, and it's going to be exactly 5 feet and 1 inch from my pool. Right now, there is an existing chain link fence around 2 sides of 40 Center Street property. They haven't said anything if that chain link fence is going to come down or not. The privacy factor in the pool will be totally gone. I suspect to see people up there with binoculars looking at people in my pool. On the terrace side, on the building, the northwest side, which abuts my parking lot of 115 cars, if the building is 5 feet 1 inch from that property line, how deep are the terraces going to be, and are they going to sit literally on top of the cars in my parking lot? The building, and this is just a personal comment, I think is extremely unattractive. The part that the people at 19 Winchester Street will be looking at is the rear. Of all the surfaces, the rear is the least attractive. It's going to block the sun and all of the views from the 100 units in the rear of my building at 19 Winchester Street. Those people have had nice sort of views.
One more minute.
Okay, goodbye.
Okay,
Thank you for
sorry.
your consideration.
You know, just saying, you know, it might be a good idea if we pass a list back so you don't have to stand.
It's okay, they were already there.
Oh, you already, okay. Sorry. Yes, sir.
My name is Don Sharak. I live at 50 Center Street. I've lived there for 19 years. I wish to raise a couple of detailed points and then speak with my 3 minutes somewhat generally. 50 Center Street, I believe, has a setback of 30 feet. My understanding, I may be wrong, but my understanding is the setback on 40 Center Street, if you go to the door, not to the steps, is 25 feet, not what was maintained earlier. I've been pulling out of my driveway for 19 years, and I am well aware of the number of individuals who live up the road at 100 Center Street who are in scooters, in wheelchairs, and also the large number of women who, and men who come by with strollers with babies. And pulling out of 50 Center Street is a complex and very difficult procedure, which I do with great care. With an awareness, and often have to stop. So I wish to add, when the traffic analysis is done, it may not actually capture those details, which is part of my personal experience for 19 years. Briefly, also I work with individuals with disabilities. One handicapped spot is really playing dice. Individuals in their adult life have a 60% chance of becoming disabled or handicapped at some point and requiring use of disability insurance. If someone does require handicap, as I know many individuals have, they would be then out of luck if and would not be able to enter or leave their building if they needed to use a handicap facility if only one handicap space was allowed. Something else I would mention about the six-story height. I'm well aware of what happens when the wind blows through that neighborhood. I live in a three-story wooden building, and it sways. So I have some questions as to the stability of such a building as a wooden building, as it was suggested. So just briefly, one other comment. About 40 years ago, a gentleman named Newman wrote a book called Defensible Space, and it talked about the community feeling that you get from environments that have 3 stories approximately, a sense of ownership, a sense of involvement and engagement. I walked over here tonight, one of the nice things you can do in this neighborhood, and I was well aware not of the number of large buildings, but how much of this neighborhood and environment, not on the commercial streets such as Harvard, but on the other streets, is a 3-story neighborhood, a 3-story environment, and how much that contributes to the sense of community. And my concern is that a 6-story building on that site will begin to create a corridor, or rather a canyon-like mentality, which goes against the community environmental flavor and feeling. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Beth Cates. I live at 105 Center Street, right across from 100. And I want to thank you all for some of your very thorough considerations, particularly about parking. And also about trash, because living across from 100 Center Street, they pull their dumpsters out onto the road and create a huge traffic issue when trash day comes along. One of the things that I wanted to bring up, and you spoke about it at the beginning of this, is the number of 40Bs within a few blocks radius. There's this one. I just found out about 420 Harvard Street, which is around the corner from me. And there's also the proposed KI 40B, which is likely to be taller than 6 stories. And I would like to add that many of the 4 and 5-story buildings around there are about 100 years old, those, apartment buildings. And they add a lot of character to the neighborhood as opposed to just stories. I was also a PTO co-president at Devotion School. And I know that people, first of all, we all are aware of the overcrowding of the schools, and many people will squeeze themselves, families will squeeze themselves into 1-bedroom apartments, 2-bedroom apartments. They don't need a 3-bedroom apartment to have 4 children so that they can put their kids in Brookline schools. And so I can foresee having a lot more children in this building than it's originally intended for. I just want to say that we're just being attacked by development and 40B development in this neighborhood. And when they do their traffic study, they should do their traffic study at the time when the farmer's market is going, because there's a lot of traffic in those blocks that is generated by the farmer's market. Much of it is pedestrian, and the entry to the parking garage is going to be a challenge. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just say that we're well aware of, all the additive effects of some of these projects on our schools, but we are not allowed to bring that up in the 40B process, which is a little frustrating for all of us.
Ms. Rosenstern.
Hi, I'm Harriet Rosenstein, town meeting member, 53 Center Street. There's a lot of us here who live on or near Center Street, obviously. Many of the things I had wanted to say, in some sense, have been touched on. I think, therefore, that what I want to emphasize is how crucial this particular structure is. Crucial to Center Street in toto, crucial in many senses to the existence of Coolidge Corner as thus far we have known it. It's been a kind of hinge, yeah? We have the commercial area running down Beacon, Harvard, and then we have this formerly sweet and inviting little enclave. 3-story houses, quite historic, and then these monstrosities that have resulted from demolition of similar sweet houses. I'm not just frightened, I am also irate at the state in which not only Center Street, but possibly a good deal of North Brookline is going. wonderful structures, not only aesthetically, but historically, are being demolished, not because people believe that affordable housing matters, but because they want to make a hell of a lot of money. And much of our sense of the texture of community, of neighborhood, is being violated in this way. I think a stop must be put to it, especially when we're talking about a tiny area which has already taken many hits, and a particular structure which is of unusual historic value and indeed of great and dignified beauty. Whatever you can do to stop this mess, please do. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Steve Pendry. My wife Elisa is here too. We live at 26 Winchester Street, within sight of the project area. But it's not because we're neighbors and walk by that property every day of our lives that we're here. We speak more to a larger issue of preservation in Brookline, and how, of course, Center Street is an epicenter of everything that can go wrong in historic preservation. I'm a former president of the Brookline Historical Society and a 20-year veteran of the National Park Service working in preservation. And an area such as Center Street really demands attention and an explanation for, why things have gone so wrong from the preservation point of view. And ironically, I hold up the Coolidge Corner District Plan from 2007, which speaks to many of the issues that we've heard about tonight. I don't have the feeling the developers looked at the draft Coolidge Corner building forms, which don't seem to really reflect the proposed development here. And turning a few pages further, in fact, there's a district plan that actually identifies this building and its neighbor as an area that has been deemed worthy by some members of the Preservation Commission of consideration for a local historic district status. And there aren't, it's shown in green, and there aren't that many other green areas in Coolidge Corner. So that's something to reflect about. But quite honestly, I wonder, is this an exercise in the waste of taxpayers' money to fund a study in 2007 and to have no follow-up on this at all? Another example of that is in August 2015, the staff of the Preservation Commission actually found that this building, 40 Center Street, is eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. There are 4 criteria which go into such a designation. This building is eligible on the basis of 2 of those criteria. A visit to the Preservation Commission last week yielded the information that no action has been taken on that. But meanwhile, staff could be working on this effort, and whether or not 40B is successful, it's important in the town of Brookline to identify and nominate all properties that are eligible for listing on the National Register and the State Register as well. So there are these larger issues, but this project is excellent in really providing a focal point for some of these larger preservation issues that we all face in Brookline. Thank you.
Thank you. We should explain, though, I know some of you are probably pretty sophisticated about the 40B law, but it's a state law which allows people to override many of our local zoning and issues like preservation. And so there's, it's a bit of a problem.
Good evening. My name is Derek Chang, and on behalf of the 33 residents at 41 Center Street who signed the petition letter before you, we tried to channel our many concerns into 3 areas which we believe that this application fails to meet the state regulations under 760 CMR Section 56. We've detailed them in detail in that letter, but just to summarize very quickly, 760 CMR 56(8)B allows a local zoning board of appeals to deny a comprehensive permit if it's not consistent with local needs or if the board finds there are no conditions that will adequately address local concerns. Local concerns, as defined earlier in that statute, include the following: promoting better site and building design in relation to surroundings, protecting the health and safety of residents, protecting the natural environment. So in our concerns, we've noted promoting better site and building design. Many people have stated that this design is incongruent with the adjacent typology. The building massing far overshadows everything in that block on Center Street between Beacon Street and Wellman Street. And the developer is being duplicitous by including Beacon Street and Harvard Street, which are commercial areas, in that zoning map. There are many public safety issues with that kind of design. Fire access to the higher floor, to the 5-foot setback. The balconies will go over that 5-foot setback. We've heard problems about parking. And in addition to the parking issue for the traffic study, we want to point out the major problems due to concurrent construction. If 40B were to proceed on Center Street, the Devotion School renovation will occur on Harvard Street. There are other proposals on Harvard Street from KI, and et cetera. It'll create a potential major problem for emergency vehicle access if you have backups along Beacon Street, Center Street, Harvard Street. Everything will have to be diverted to Winchester, and there's very few north-south points of access. In addition, I second what everyone else has said, but there are some major procedural issues that we can pose to this proposal.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Lisa Allenzeig. I'm a director butter at 19 Winchester Street. I am also the daughter of a well-known former, he's no longer alive. My father was a well-known Boston architect. And I know a number of architects in the Boston area who would be opposed to this project. The building is ugly. I think you should really reconsider this project and not allow it. The traffic is going to be bad. It's already bad enough in our area. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to explain a little more about the 40B law. So this board does not decide whether the project moves forward or not. That would be the Zoning Board of Appeals. And we are holding this hearing tonight because we are going to supply comments to the state agency that would approve the project or not. So we actually don't have the ability to say, to stop it, but we are going to try to take your comments and funnel them to the state agency.
Could I just ask, how do we all speak to the people who can or cannot approve it?
Okay, well, when this comes before the Zoning Board of Appeals, which I know some of you who are town meeting members will be aware of when those dates are, and
abutters will be notified.
And abutters will be notified, and you should absolutely attend all the meetings the Zoning Board of Appeals has on this project.
Right. And that'll be at some point in the future, assuming the state agency issues the project eligibility letter.
I'm Chuck Swartz. I live at 69 Center Street, and I'm a town meeting member. I'm trying to I sent you all an email earlier. I don't know if you received it. Mel did. Yeah. Good. I'm trying to get it up here. I'd like to show the picture. I'm not very tech savvy. Neil, I know that you are. I wish you were here. You could help me out with this. I just wanted to get onto a browser so I could get my own email, or if there's any way that you could get the email up here.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to work, Chuck.
Okay.
Yeah, every email system is different.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, anyways, my wife and I were talking earlier, and we were trying to think of other areas of Coolidge Corner that have been changed, that have been decimated as much as Center Street has over the years, and we couldn't think of one. So I put together some pictures of the different blocks that I sent to all of you. I hope you have a chance to look at it. But the pictures start with the block on the even side of Center Street between Fuller and Williams, where there's only one of the original houses that are remaining, and it's surrounded by huge buildings at 100 and 112 Center Street. The next block between Williams and Wellman Street also All but one of the houses have been taken down and have been replaced by large apartment houses. The block, the even side between Wellman and Beacon Street, which contains 40 Center Street, is the only block on that side of the street that is still intact. To take down that building will be a shame. It would lead to the further decimation of our neighborhood. The houses on the other side, the odd side, there are many lovely Victorians that remain. There are 9 of them. They all have wonderful setbacks, and this is sort of indicative of what the neighborhood was like. And we're trying to keep a sense of neighborhood on Center Street. One of the pictures, again, I hope you look at it, on the block, the odd block between Williams and Fuller Street contain the infamous 121 Center Street, next to 2 lovely Victorians. 121 Center Street was also a lovely Victorian that 15 years ago fell victim to a proposed 40B. They wanted to put up a 6-story, 36-unit building on that site. And through the efforts of the neighborhood and with the help of the Board of Selectmen at the time, the 40B was denied, but the developers were able to put up, as of right, a 3-story, 9-unit building. If you were to take a look at that picture, you would see a box similar to what's being proposed now. And what Selectman Heller said really rings to this case, that in that instance, a lovely historic building was torn down and replaced by a box, and now we're faced with the possibility of that happening again. We have the chance to do something about it, and I hope that we can save a lovely part of Center Street. I would further like to add a couple of comments. When the architect presented his slide of the buildings in the neighborhood, showing several high-rise buildings. It's still not a high-rise neighborhood. There are single-family homes that line the streets. It gives you a wonderful sense of community. One of the buildings was incorrectly identified. One of the apartment buildings on Wellman Street was identified as being 4 stories, and it's only 3 stories, so I'd just like to make that correction. And also, I just want to point out that as far as putting a building where they're proposing, it will be opposite a very busy parking lot. As Mr. Sharrock said, there are a lot of people that come by, a lot of seniors that come by from 100 and 112 Center Street that contain about 300 seniors that will be going by this property. It's just a very dense neighborhood, and it's not the right place to add 45 more units. Thank you. And take a look at my email. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Rosenthal. I'm the chair of the Winchester House Condominium Trust. That's 19 Winchester Street. A couple of my owners have spoken already. I want to point out that there are 11 of us here tonight, all in opposition to the proposal. Much of what I need to say has been said already, and rather than repeat it, I'll just summarize it. The historic area, I mean, really, it's just such a lovely building that's there now, and all over Brookline, we're getting these big, ugly, gargantuan structures that are just making traffic horrible. They're making parking ridiculous, and I echo the comments about the Center Street lot. During farmers market, forget about it, but on any given day, one can barely go to a movie there with parking the car there because there are no spots. I don't know where these people are going to park. The trees on that street are beautiful, and those are going to go by the boards. It's just not going to be a tree-lined, pretty Brookline street anymore if this thing goes up. We wonder about the schools. How are these, where are these kids going to go to school? It seems that Brookline is overtaxed for schools already, and this is not going to help any. We are concerned about the actual footprint of the building. In terms of fire regulations, I understand, though, that that's taken care of separately, but it does seem very close to us, and we wonder about, can a fire truck get in? Can a ladder reach us? Can it reach them? We're also on the side, they will be overlooking our parking lot, which has a number of cars there. We worry about that and the proximity to cars and a whole building with all of their equipment right there. Internal equipment that could catch on fire or be a problem. As Carol mentioned, the other issues are a little more personal in terms of the obstruction of the views for people in our building and people overlooking the pool. That pool has really increased our land values and is a joy and pleasant for all concerned within our building. We take very good care of it. The last thing we need is people hanging over our pool, throwing things in or jumping in or whatever. It's just not a place to put a building that in such a tight area. Those are the issues that we have, and I believe that all of Winchester House is in agreement with that. And if we, need a petition, we will get one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Don McNamara. I live at 12 Wellman Street, and my back window looks right out on this property. So our primary concerns are the scale of the building and, of course, the parking. To give you a little idea, the deficit is about 73 parking spots. The parking lot right next door to this property has about 34 parking spots. So double that parking lot, that's the number of spots we need. Just a couple quick points. There's only one handicap spot on this plan for parking, but there's 2 accessible units in the building. I think that's an issue as well. We're also concerned about the sun that's going to be blocked out. A building between 60 and 70 feet tall should cast a shadow on Wellman Street, all the properties on Wellman Street, for about 6 months of the year. I think that kills our garden and everything else. And finally, parts of this plan are touting the environmental aspects of it, how green the building is, et cetera. It's not green to destroy a perfectly fine building and build a new building. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shauna Giora-Gorfine. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 11, and I live at 66 Winchester Street, which I think makes me actually the person who lives farthest from this location who's here tonight. And just a few points, and I know some of these are somewhat repeating what other people have said, but to bring my own perspective to this, my building, I think, is one of those ugly box buildings, as it's been described, except my building was built in 1983. And directly in front of our apartment building, and I believe as part of the development process for our building, is a lovely Victorian house with purple trim. It's right at the end of William Street. And my understanding, and I didn't live in Massachusetts in 1983, and I wasn't really old enough to understand these things, is that preserving that building was part of my building, my current building being built. And I think that that was a worthwhile thing to do. I congratulate whoever was involved in that process 30-something years ago. It makes our place not seem so imposing on Winchester Street. It's a more inviting, I guess, streetscape there. But in particular with my building and the townhouse in front, between the house and the apartment building, there are 17 units, 2 3-bedroom units and 15 2-bedroom units. And for those 17 units, we have 21 parking spots. Now, I'm not saying that's the correct ratio either. That's a lot of cars. Maybe we don't need quite so many cars, but those 21 spots are filled, almost always by people who live in the building. Occasionally, one of the outdoor spots is rented. And what I'm given to understand from these plans is we're supposed to have 20 2- and 3-bedroom units with only 17 spots in exactly the same neighborhood with presumably a similar mix of residents with children, without children. There aren't a lot of people in my building with children besides us, but people still want their cars and have their cars, even if they're not driving them every day. And I don't see how in a building with that many 2- and 3-bedroom units, only 17 spots could be doable. This isn't a bunch of studio and 1-bedroom apartments. It's just a very different makeup of residents. And I just want to echo what everybody else said about the beautiful historic nature of the building that's there now, of the current block on Center Street. This is not a commercial street. It's a quiet, mostly residential, tree-lined, small building neighborhood, and I really would hate to see that go away. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, so, yes. What?
You have to go.
Just,
Carol Murphy Edberg again from 19 Winchester Street. There's some incorrect information in the packet that was on the website. To the left of 40 Center Street is a beautiful old red brick building that was previously the S.S. Pierce Mansion many years ago. Anyway, these folks have identified it as a rooming house, and it is no longer. It used to be a rooming house. It is no longer. It's a building that is rented to Newberry College, and it's a dormitory with maybe 25 or 30 young adults going to Newberry College, live in it. So my point is, not a rooming house, it's a dormitory.
okay, thank you. The point of this hearing was to hear from the public so we could take the public's views in formulating our response. And it's certainly my sense, this is the third 40B hearing, and the first one, which was on Boylston Street in Chestnut Hill, I think the tone of the board and the public was we kind of liked the project. The project had some issues that needed to be examined, but we wanted to convey that the developer should work with us, and hopefully we'd come up with a good project. And then the next 40B was Hancock Village, where we expressed some concerns, but we also requested that the developer work with us. To me, this project just hits me as kind of totally unsuitable for the site. But we have to frame this within the context of 40B. So the things that I've heard, well, first of all, I think as a matter of town policy, we recognize the need for affordable housing, and we do things to encourage affordable housing, and we've done a lot. We have inclusionary zoning. We have a housing trust fund, which we use to leverage financing for projects that we like. So I don't think anything that we would say here would not be anti-affordable housing. It's more specific to this particular project, but we've heard, and I'd like the Selectmen's comments to reflect that the historic preservation aspects and the fact that smart growth also includes trying to reuse existing buildings as much as possible, and that really promotes sustainable development. And while this is a transit-oriented site, 17 spaces for 45 units is, in my view, grossly inadequate.
It's also the building itself, I think, is too large for that lot, the footprint of the building.
Right. The impacts to the abutting properties need to be carefully considered, and shadow studies need to be done, and we would hope adjustments to the project would occur based on those shadow studies and other impacts to the.
Yeah, and I think some of the neighbors raised some interesting concerns about the trees disappearing, you know, the environmental effect of that, and
there should be
Yeah.
greater
And the lack of-
setbacks.
And the lack of open space for
Right.
who will be, the people who will be living here. I mean, they're taking practically every inch of the lot to put a building on.
Yeah.
The scale of the building is, it's out of scale to the immediate abutters on Center Street, and it's an important transition property for the neighborhood, and it just, you know, it brings the tall, imposing buildings more into this single-family neighborhood, and I think that should be a part of our comments.
I don't think it's a real, I don't think it's. You have to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is redundant. Harriet Rosenstein, Precinct 9, 53 Center. I have lived for many years in this house. I have seen very often people with walkers, people in electric wheelchairs going down Center Street proper. That is to say, not on sidewalks, but
Right.
in the street.
So you've made the point. Our comments should indicate that the traffic study needs to consider the existence of seniors, especially the fact that the cars are going to be crossing the sidewalk.
Hundreds of
at that
seniors.
point.
And pedestrians, not
And-
just
right.
seniors,
Yeah.
anybody who's
Right,
walking.
right, because there are a lot there with the farmer's market and stuff. I think the other point that somebody brought up that I thought, I don't know if this is a valid point to raise in relation to 40B, but certainly for all of us who live in this town and try to get around, the sheer volume of construction in that one part of town at one time, I think somebody raised this point, and it's very legitimate, that is going to be a safety concern, to have, you know, make the streets impassable for emergency vehicles, et cetera.
And one last word.
Yeah, Chuck Swartz, I just wanted to point out that at no time was anybody in the neighborhood contacted by the developers for any input, unlike the process with the people at KI who had meetings before they've even made a proposal, that I think that people in the neighborhood should at least have be contacted and be consulted about before anything goes forth.
Right. So a letter should indicate some more of a neighborhood process, if that's appropriate for, and certainly we should have in there similar language we have in some of our other letters about, as a condition of the Pell, that the developer work with the town. And some subsidizing agencies seem to be willing to put that in as a condition of the Pell. Others, not so much. Anything else that should go into our comments?
No, I think that was.
Okay.
The points that I heard, yeah.
Okay, and we'll have a draft next week that the board will be discussing. So, thank you. It'll be available. It's not going to be a public hearing. Yeah.
It'll be in our board packet, which is online, right?
Yeah, it'll be in the link to the Board of Selectmen's agenda on Monday. Okay, if you can take the conversations out of the room, we have additional business that we need to conduct. Can you please take the conversation out to the hallway? Thank you.
Someone forget something, no? Okay, here's what I've gotten so far. Georgia, Alabama, Massachusetts, Tennessee, and Virginia went to Trump on the Republican side. Cruz got Texas.
Oh, how much, do you know?
I don't know. And on the Georgia and Tennessee have gone to Clinton. Oklahoma's very close. Vermont went to Sanders. And Massachusetts apparently is very close between Clinton and Sanders. But the, what's that? I don't have that one yet. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Okay, now back to our budget. I don't know. So let's do town council's budget. Ms. Murphy,
Good evening,
how are
Mr.
you tonight?
I'm well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's my privilege to appear before you this evening to discuss the fiscal year 2017 budget for the Legal Services Department. You will see that it is largely level funded with the exception of the proposal to increase the legal department's outside counsel budget by $100,000. The basis for that request is twofold. First, we've looked at trends over the past couple of years, and as you know, we have gone to both you and the advisory committee seek reserve fund transfers to fund additional outside counsel costs, and we're also working with the HR department to look at providing counsel for some of the cases that flow through that particular office. I will comment briefly on some of the more notable accomplishments in our office. Pleased to say that we fill the position of Associate Town Counsel with Jonathan Simpson. He's been a tremendous asset for our office, has been really, has provided a lot of assistance, particularly in the area of zoning and planning and contracts. First Assistant Town Counsel Patty Correa shepherded the medical marijuana facility licensing process. Recently, she did a terrific job of that. It was a tremendous amount of work. I would like to commend the work that she did on that. We worked with the Finance Director, Steve Cirillo, to negotiate a host community agreement with NETA, the facility, the medical marijuana facility. Associate Town Counsel Buchheit drafted and negotiated a number of school leases for property, which was a tremendous amount of work. As you know, we concluded the Hancock Village Superior Court appeals, and we filed an appeal of the comprehensive permit in the land court, which is ongoing. We also began the work a couple of years ago. We talked about some of the incentives in our office that we were beginning work on, one of which was streamlining the contract process, and the other was conducting an inventory of town-owned land. We've been so busy with litigation, we haven't made a tremendous amount of headway on those projects, but we have started, and I'm pleased to say that we'll be probably moving forward on those projects in the coming year. So in addition, in the coming year, in addition to the pretty heavy litigation schedule that we have in our office, we'll continue to work on those projects. And we also anticipate providing an additional amount of work on the Chapter 40B projects that you're hearing about recently in the near future. Happy to answer any questions.
Selectman Daley.
Yeah, I noticed on your performance and workload indicators that the special ed appeals were up from what you had estimated there were going to be. Now, there was a slight change to the state law a few years ago, I believe, that made things a little more favorable to school districts. Is that is that having any beneficial effect, or why are we seeing these cases go up?
I wouldn't say that, well, that, the change you're referring to was the threshold for what students are entitled to. It was more like 10 years ago that change was made. I think, and frankly, we work collaboratively with outside counsel to handle these cases. To the extent that cases are going to hearing, we use outside counsel. If cases can be managed in-house or settled in-house and so forth, we provide representation for those. I think there has been an increase in the number of cases because more families are moving in, the school population is increasing, and more families are seeking special ed support. In connection with that, I would like to send a shout out to Dr. Schmuckler, who is the the associate superintendent for special services. She has done a terrific job of creating programs in district to try to reduce special education costs. And I've recognized over the years that I've provided support to the school system, I've recognized that, and particularly under her leadership.
Question I ask, I think probably every year is, with the increased costs for outside counsel, are the cases such that it would make more sense to hire another attorney versus going outside? Is there consistency in the skill sets, or is it that's needed versus going out for specialized skills?
Well, we use outside counsel for limited purposes. One of them, of course, is environmental law. That's a real niche practice, so we would probably continue that. I think the model that's in place for special education is a really good one. There's a threshold. Once we reach that threshold, we either provide additional services or we tap into our budget for those services. In the area of employment law, we've seen an increase in the litigation in those areas. That's an area that the attorneys in the legal department currently have expertise in. To the extent the cases increase, we might need additional support. One area we might look at, and of course this would be in a conversation with Director DeBow, would be the area of labor and collective bargaining. A number of communities do use in-house counsel for labor purposes, and that's a model that we would certainly be having a conversation with the HR director with in the future.
Any other questions? This is a pretty straightforward budget. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm trying to figure out how to formulate it. The issue of diversity in town departments is, of course, a hot issue in town. And in the committee that selected you as town council, this discussion came up. And there was suggestion that the way to address the lack of diversity at the department level head, which was, the way it was posed, was to get diverse candidates into lower level positions in town departments who could then rise up and take over senior positions either here or elsewhere. So that hasn't happened in the legal department, so far as I know. How was the recruitment and hiring of the new assistant town council done that attempted to address that issue?
Well, we did a very...
I recognize it's a difficult problem. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I just want to just raise that as something that always has to be a focus of our...
Well, it is a difficult question. We did a really expansive outreach. We reached out to Dr. Gelano, and of course the HR department, to try to draw in the broadest reach of applicants that we could find. We were fortunate enough to be able to interview 2 or 3 candidates. I believe there was an African-American woman we interviewed and 2 or 3 Latino women. But when it came down to it, because of the limited staff in our office, we're a 4-attorney office, we needed to hire someone who had a really, really broad experience in municipal law. And frankly, it's a rare beast. One of the things that I hope that answers your question. One of the things I've been thinking about, we've been fortunate to have interns in our office from various law schools, and we had a fantastic intern last year, and I asked him, how can we draw you into municipal law? And, he said, well, geez, I'm actually going to go back and work in my dad's law practice. But it led me to think about the possibility of hiring interns, because I think it would be a great idea to bring, young people in from law school and try to get them interested in municipal law. It's an area you can help shape policy, and I think it would be a terrific area of practice for any young attorney. So one of the things I've been thinking about is opening our office up more to law school interns in the hopes that we can reach out to minority law students who would then develop an interest in municipal law.
Keep pushing.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it for the questions. We don't vote this tonight, right? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Good night.
Next budget is IT, Information Technology. Mr. Stokes. Not as straightforward a budget.
Well, good evening, Kevin Stokes, Chief Information Officer. I don't know if I would characterize it as not as straightforward. Exciting, ever-changing. I'll go with that, and we'll see where it goes from there. Thank you again for the opportunity to present the FY17 budget. We've had a very productive year, and certainly as the organization as a whole continues to embrace and adopt technology, presents a lot of opportunity for certainly for the individuals in IT, but also all the individuals and all the collective departments to be able to leverage technology to do their work. I'll speak to some of the dynamics around some of the market forces in a bit, but I want to certainly go through some of the highlights of the budget. The net budget itself, you'll see, has an increase, a proposed increase of $62,185. And there's really 3 components that make up that number, and I can walk you through that just briefly, if I may. If you recall, I was here in July or August regarding a master lease for network equipment. So what we were able to do last year, certainly in conjunction with the schools, was able to put together a master purchase for our complete network refresh for all town and school buildings. So what we were able to do effectively was upgrade our entire infrastructure network, and that's roughly the 42 buildings that we manage within the organization with brand new equipment, put it under a master lease, and actually use what typically had been funds from both capital and operating into a streamlined $200,000 lease. So that line item you see there effectively is a lease payment specific for the 6-year lease for the network equipment we have. That's offset by decreases in services and what they call other. Other specifically is actually a reduction in training, in the training budget that we have, predominantly because we're delivering more training internally now, and we're delivering more training specific to applications, and it's delivered on-prem. So we use either consultants or in-house staff to do that. So the notion of sending folks out of the building to do training, certainly over time, it's really that it wasn't the best vehicle to accomplish that. So I don't want to leave the impression that we're cutting back on training. We're just delivering training more in a more personal approach and more of a group setting here organizationally. The $129,000, the reduction there, that's really a number of moving parts there. So there's actually a number of increases and decreases that make up that number there. Predominantly, the decrease is a net effect of essentially taking many of the maintenance contracts and a lot of the expenditures for network equipment, which is now in the lease that you see at the bottom. But that was actually offset by increases in terms of some of the applications that we've upgraded. And in terms of where we're at right now, we're actually in the middle of upgrading our permitting system now. And when we complete that particular application, we're largely at a point where we've upgraded every key enterprise application and our network infrastructure in the last 2 years. So essentially what we'll really be focused on at that point is optimizing everything that we have and getting the most value out of the investments, and certainly making sure that we're leveraging the technology. So in terms of the overall budget, one of the key points is that what you'll see, and really in a nutshell, the reason there's a net increase in the IT budget is you're going to start to see a shift in terms of capital expense over to the operating budget. And, and specifically what that refers to as applications and as infrastructure begins to age out and life cycles are coming to an end, we're embracing the cloud, not as though we're doing it willingly. We're sort of forced to do it, but in many instances, it's a much better value. The difference is that now we're not buying servers, we're not buying physical anything anymore. What we're buying is services. So over time, you'll start to see the operating budget see the impact of that. So there will be continued pressure on the IT operating budget going forward, mainly because of that. The corollary is, as pointed out in the CIP, is there'll actually be a reduction in the out year in the CIP request, because I think you'll see us buying less equipment. We're buying services so in other words, we're buying services going forward and less equipment. So all of that means what you see in front of you, based on a lot of the movement over the last year, is the increase of $62,000 in the overall budget. Just a couple of other key points. We did receive 2 grants this year, which were quite helpful. One was from the Department of Homeland Security for security awareness training, and part of the training we delivered in-house. We actually did a number of sessions. I say a number, I've lost track, but we trained approximately 600 folks in the organization in small group settings around the importance of protecting information, protecting data, being able to recognize security intrusion, security threats, et cetera. And that's a program that we really look to continue going forward, because the threat doesn't go away, but we have an opportunity now that we've got, I think, a good base level of awareness in the staff to be able to build on that, and to certainly to leverage that understanding going forward. And along that line, we actually were just awarded a grant via the Commonwealth Innovation Grant, which is our dear friend Mr. Cronin is key in that program as well. We were able to actually put a request in for funding for the development of what's called the Cyber Incident Response Plan, which is the other side of that, which is if something happens, what do we do? How do we respond to it? And sort of what's the playbook look like? And not that I feel that we have impending threats, but I think it's good practical and prudent judgment on our part to be ready to respond, and to certainly to be respond in an expedient manner that's very thoughtful. We'll leave it at that. So outside of that, I'll certainly be glad to take any questions you may have, any particular programs or initiatives.
A question, one of your objectives is to re-architect the online payments system into a consolidated payment portal. Currently, you have different accounts for water and real estate taxes and excise taxes, and it's different vendors even. So what's our plans there?
We actually did roll that out it's a soft rollout right now. We rolled it out at the end of November, and it's largely being driven by the finance department now, but as the bills are going out, they're reminding folks now, because there are so many disparate bills, it actually is something we have to have assistance from the actual recipient to identify what bills that they have that they would like to put into the consolidated portal. So actually, if you look at the online payments engine, you'll see that they're actually now starting to become consolidated. So more and more folks are actually taking advantage of that. I haven't gotten a rough count on it, but we've been marketing it, and certainly looking to make sure folks are aware of it.
Well, this is the first I'm aware of it, so need to market it more.
Yes, we do.
I noticed when I last paid my my water bill, I think, that there was an option to consolidate.
To add additional bills.
To add.
Yes.
To consolidate.
Maybe I didn't pay attention.
Probably.
So, yeah.
No, the point
I just clicked through.
The point is well taken. We certainly need to market it better.
Selectman Daley.
Yeah, I just want to get back to, first of all, I want to clarify, you didn't mean to suggest that Mr. Cronin is helping his friends. I'm sure you applied and you had a good...
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. He's...
application.
He's been working the Commonwealth as a whole
Yeah.
to make sure folks are aware of the program.
But to get to the large increase in your capital budget because of the network upgrade, is that really just a one-shot deal, or should we be looking at our model here and maybe reevaluating whether it's cheaper to buy things than lease them?
The $200,000 line item, that is actually a lease payment, so that's a 6-year lease that we have for the equipment. So we invested approximately $1.5 million on upgrading the entire network infrastructure. So that actually, from both educational technology and for government technology, that actually provides us with a network that will, really serve our needs into the foreseeable future, and I mean at least 5 to 7 years.
But we're going to see that $200,000.
That's an annual payment,
for
correct? Yes.
Upcoming years.
Yes.
And then I assume at the end of 5 years, we'd need to upgrade again, is that the?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that because it's technology, I wouldn't necessarily say you're upgrading with the same technology. The landscape will be very different for them. And I do want to point out that even in spite of the increase, we were spending roughly about $220,000 annually, both in capital and operating. So what we're able to do is consolidate all that annual spend into a $200,000 annual lease payment. So that particular piece actually came out, in a much more favorable outcome as opposed to, continuing to do what we were doing. The last couple of years have been difficult, obviously, with a lot of movement in the schools and a lot of added capacity and a lot of buildings coming online, to be able to, not only just connect them all, but then to absorb that equipment into your life cycle and make sure that it does get replaced, and now it has to be managed and, it has to be part of the family, so to speak.
Selectman Heller.
One of the concerns I have is just a general concern about the amount of paper that we deal in. And it seems that the future is to have stuff more online, and I'm wondering whether the services that you're talking about include some cloud sort of based storage for and easy access for people who work in the town, so that we're not so paper dependent.
Exactly. And yes and no. So in theory, I guess the short answer is I think we've bought everything we need to buy in terms of being able to do that. And to some extent, that's probably the easier part of the equation. The more difficult part of the equation is working differently and certainly looking at business process. So whatever the paper is, it generates information for somebody to handle, manage, and do something with. So when you look at that process, which may have many, many other points of involvement, it's really architecting that, leveraging technology, such that it starts in an electronic form and somehow magically gets to its end, still in an electronic form. So that there's a lot more complexity in that, certainly in that conversation around, changing what we do and how we do it, and there's a lot of factors to consider. But the good point is I think we've got a lot of the infrastructure in place to do that. We have storage, we have the network, we have, many of the gadgets needed to do that. There's certainly more things, smaller things we need to buy, but the large expenses are there. Now it's really around looking at what we do and how we do it.
Selectman Franco.
I believe one of the initiatives over the past year was sort of the migration of a number of public safety frequencies into a sort of a consolidated single signal or set of bandwidth. I'm wondering if you can sort of fill me in as to whether that process has been completed and how it's gone.
I can speak to it just tangentially because I'm involved in probably more of the infrastructure side. So what I can tell you is what we've been able to do is actually collapse a lot of the public safety frequencies into less gear. That's actually now, we see it, and I see it maybe in a different way, which is we have a decrease in some of our telecom expenses. Now they're actually leveraging the network that we have in place. Again, same investment we've already made. Now the public safety equipment now is transmitting many of those frequencies over our existing network. They were pretty far along in terms of the police department side. I think the fire department side was coming in behind that. But I can't speak to the specifics of the project plan, but I still believe they're on schedule.
And let me compliment you and Mr. Kleckner and Ms. Goff and Mr. Faison for your putting of data online. I know that maybe it's a lesser known part of the town website, but there is a data portal where we make a variety of different types of data available. Clearly, this is something that's gotten a lot of airtime. It's been the subject of conversation in government, making data-driven decisions. And I want to compliment the four of you for putting Brookline in a good position, well positioning us to take advantage of this sort of new way of looking at information and making decisions.
Thank you, and I think you'll be pleased with what you see coming in FY17.
Yeah, and a lot of what that does too is it allows citizens to take the data and massage it in their own ways. So I've seen a lot of use of some of our GIS and taking citizens taking our GIS data and creating their own maps and diagrams and seeing their own trends. And sometimes they'll see stuff that we don't see.
And it allows for the five of us and town government in general to take advantage of the unbelievable expertise of the citizens of this town, the residents.
We actually started with an open checkbook, and what we call open checkbook 1.0 was very rigid. It served the purpose, but it was really, it assumed you had a pretty good base level knowledge of the budget book and a lot of the budget processes. What we hope to roll out over the summer will be a lot more friendlier to a layperson and certainly easier to navigate. And then if we were able to connect that with some performance measures, I think that we'll have a lot more rich data to look at that certainly has a lot more extensive ability for, again, anybody to be able to look through it.
Any other questions? I think you're done.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
And recreation.
Thank you. Lisa Paradis, Recreation Director. Thanks for having me here. Good evening. Hopefully I'll be brief so we can all get home at a good hour tonight. Although I have to say I do enjoy coming here, although it makes me nervous every year. I do like my one time to talk about the great things that we do, and hopefully talk a little bit about the budget as well. Tonight I do want to start off by talking about Brookline Recreation and just sort of our revised mission statement and that we work to provide health and wellness opportunities that change people's lives. It is really what we do. We create and foster services that encourage a lifetime of community activity, connection, and support families in Brookline. We are proud partners, which is part of our legacy, I believe, with the Brookline Public School System, Council on Aging, Brookline Mental Health, Brookline Interactive Group, Brookline Community Foundation, multiple neighborhood groups, and of course, parent youth sports groups, and many more. I think that illustrates the fact that we are, at Brookline Recreation, the thread that weaves through a family's life here in Brookline. With that being said, I have to say that the frontline staff are the people who really who make it happen, and I do want to acknowledge that I have an incredible staff. You are only as good as your weakest link, and I do not believe we have any weak links. So that may be somewhat confident of me to say, but I truly do believe that. So a couple of them are here in the audience. The acting business manager, Jerry Kelly, is here, and my esteemed colleague, the assistant director, Melissa Petit. And I do have to point out John Bain, the chairman of the Park and Rec Commission, who is our fearless champion at all times. Fearless, right. What I also wanted to say, and what shaped, I think, is the common theme for the budgets this year, for most budgets, I think, is that we have three issues that have affected and shaped our budget, and that is school enrollment issues. They don't just affect the schools, they do affect the families that enjoy other activities and partake in other activities in town. Employment benefit costs, as well as the part-time minimum wage increases. So we've had to really adjust, adapt, and be nimble with our budget in that way. And I think we've done a fairly decent job of doing that. We have three budgets associated with Brookline Rec, as you know. The general budget is a total decrease, pardon me, that's a better word, total decrease of $32,570. That the decrease comes from personnel, I'm sorry, that's offset by personnel increases of about $8,600. Utilities decreased a little over $11,000, and there was a capital decrease of $30,000. On the revolving side, we had a total increase in expenses of over $100,000 this year. That was comprised of personnel increases of almost $65,000 due to wage increases, mandated wage increases, as you know. Services increased almost $15,000, utilities about $6,000, and our intergovernmental costs increased by a little over $21,000. We were offset by about $5,100 in decrease in supplies. From the Golf Enterprise Fund, we have a fairly sizable increase that we don't usually have, and that's due to the costs that will be associated with the new driving range facility that is slated to be open July 1st. So it's about $146,000 increase, 66 of which is personnel, made up of part-time salaries and some collective bargaining in there. We have offset that by some decreases in services, and we had some increase in equipment repair. Capital increase is about $10,000, and a debt service increase of a little over $33,000, because we will be paying for the borrowing of some more of that, of the new bond that was voted on from this last town meeting. I did want to point out as well that our financial aid to families this year went up by about 15%, from $85,000 last year to over $100,000 this year is our projection. We hope that it stays at that number, but we've been seeing a true increase in financial aid. The other part I wanted to point out was that we have absorbed in the revolving fund through what we could do with fee increases as well as decreases across the board in supplies. We've absorbed all the increases from the personnel, utilities, and intergovernmental, and we've increased fees according to expenses wherever possible and cut expenses and supplies to balance our budget. Couple of highlights from the year. We successfully completed a 4-week crowdfunding campaign that brought in over $21,000 to help in some accessibility issues with the, or accessibility amenities, I should say, for the aquatics facility. We successfully coordinated, as you know, because most of you were there, at the 4th annual Brookline Day celebration, which will be happening again next September. We had over 8,000 attendees this year. We competed with the Patriots game, but we'll do better at trying to schedule that one this year. Rec therapy, I wanted to tell you a little bit about that, and just that we are increasing our broad outreach in rec therapy, you know, as well as affecting more people in the community. We are training our in-house staff with more inclusive behavioral management, inclusive service training for our entire aquatic staff this year. I also did want to mention that this year we will have now 2 part-time staff people who will be working for us. In the past, we've had one staff who came from Mass Rehab who had intellectual disabilities. He worked as a housekeeper for us, and it was a fabulous experience for 2 years. Jose left because he had to move out of town with his family, and we're now having a new person come in a couple of weeks from Mass Rehab, and we've actually also hired on another person straight from our inclusion service adult programs. So we're really excited about that. It's part of what we feel is our mission in town as well. We have increased by 50% our over 55 active adults program. I know, Nancy, you like to hear that every year. So that is something that we've made a concerted effort to do, and specifically focus on health and wellness activities for over 55 population. So we feel like that's going really well. And this year, again, we're in our 3rd year of offering meals, healthy meals to all of our summer camp participants. It's grown to service really the whole entire summer population of extended school year students, including summer high school students as well, which there are literally a couple thousand of. So this little idea that grew out of recreation has blossomed into a great organization through the public school system that they're able to provide an on-campus meal service that's open all day, and people can go and get food there all day. So it's been a great thing. On the golf side, I guess I can just say that we will be opening up the driving range hopefully July 1st, provided that we have some good weather in the spring. It looks like things might turn out well in that front. We aren't that far behind, a couple of weeks behind actually from our original schedule of opening in June. So we hope that that stays on track. And we are, the last thing I just wanted to say, we are still at, we're about a point above at about 79% cost recovery, so we've kept tabs on everything that we've done. We know our true cost of doing business. We've been very cognizant about that. We've been very careful, I believe, transparent, and I think very articulate about how we're using the tax dollars.
Selectman Daley.
Well, I'll tell you a secret, when your budget is actually
It
decreasing
won't be a secret.
slightly, you don't have to be nervous when you.
Oh, yeah.
But I do want to compliment you, because I thought Brookline Day was, again, a wonderful event, and I know all of you guys come in on a day that's not a regular work day and put a lot of work in beforehand and everything, so it was very good. Thank you.
It was
Thank
very
you.
well attended.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I was also very impressed when I saw the crowdfunding campaign that you just mentioned, and I like your entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes, thank you. That was headed up by Melissa Petit and our aquatic staff, and they really did a tremendous, it was in 30 days, I might add, too. That was a 30-day crowdfunding effort, so they did a great job, so.
I just wanted to hear a little more about the healthy lunch thing, because I myself am trying to eat healthier these days. And I think, I don't know if you could do it in conjunction with this, but teaching the kids how to make some healthier food while you're providing it for them or something would be great, I think, because sometimes people, you want to eat healthy, but you're not really sure what quinoa is or something like that, and I just throw that idea.
Well, I appreciate that, because we have batted that around quite a bit.
Yeah, you might partner up with the health department on that.
Yeah, actually, and the school lunch services are a great resource for that as well. So we've done that actually with our inclusive services, our rec therapy services. We do provide cooking and nutrition classes for that part of the population that we serve, and we've done a couple of those classes for kids, but I think it does have a broader reach. I appreciate that.
Any other? Selectman Helen?
I'm curious about the revenues in the Golf Enterprise Fund, and I'm wondering how I know nothing about golf, and I'm wondering how our fees compare to other golf courses of comparable size and.
Yeah, frankly, our fees are a little bit lower across the board than other courses, and we believe that probably will end as we get a better product out there. There's certainly some areas of issue at the golf course. Holes number 1 and 2, for instance, have a real problem. Our golf course has been improved substantially over the past 5 years or so, but we have a ways to go. We still feel like we have a great pace of play. We have a great product out there, but we are cognizant that we are not necessarily the best course in the area. When comparing to the Boston courses, for instance, we're a couple of dollars off. Boston courses have a very different way of funding their courses too. They function as public charities, and they don't pay debt service, so they're not really all inclusive in the self-sustainability piece, but we do, and so we have a sort of a shorter rope that we can actually borrow and spend. So that's kind of what leads us to do things incrementally. So we feel like we're in there. We do a market analysis every year. I actually have it right in front of me, but I can't see it because when I started here, I didn't use glasses, and now I do. But it's there. I did review it earlier today, but I'm happy to share that with you at any point in time.
Well, I'm curious as to whether you think that in some point in the future, the golf fees will be, and I'm happy that it's a self-sustaining enterprise, but I'm wondering whether it could help us in other areas of the town, help us with open space issues, for instance, or other recreational needs, and provide more revenue towards some of those things.
That would be certainly up to the governing boards to make that decision. However, I would just say that for many years, the golf course had part of their budget expense was a town fee that was turned over to the town from in the healthy years of golf, back in the Tiger Woods years, they call it. While I think that was beneficial in some ways to the town, and this is my personal opinion from a professional standpoint of this, we are now dealing with 40-plus years of deferred maintenance on the golf course that does no good in the long run because we end up having to pay that at some point. Somebody's got to pay for that. And I believe that as we say, take in revenue from the driving range, that money should be spent to bring the golf course up to the level that would be the crown jewel of Brookline and in the area. And I think that is a snowball effect that breeds in and of itself and would be then, I think, a time to really, once you've tackled all those issues at the course, then it would be a time to talk about what else it could do.
I mean, I think one of the reasons that at least I supported the driving range is it's a differentiator between Brookline's course and some of the surrounding courses which don't have driving ranges. I think you're correct that the Brookline course has some issues. From my perspective, the Brookline course is better than at least one of the Boston courses. So I respect what you're saying, but let's not overcompensate the other direction.
Yeah.
I have a question about weather.
Sure.
And its effect upon your department, your budget. It is no secret that we had a tough winter last year, which I'm sure had some impact upon the number of rounds of golf played. There was a decrease in FY15. And this winter, we've had a mild winter, and I assume that had some impact upon the skating rink and revenue that was generated there. Do these types of very different winters, seasons sort of offset each other, or is there some potential that that we may end up in a hole over the course of 4 or 5 years?
Well, in the case of the golf course, for instance, we actually ended the year last year in a position better than the previous year. So we ended up with about $40,000 or $50,000 over our projected revenue. So we made up for that in lost time. There's a difference, though, when you look at the number of golf rounds. They decreased because we decreased the time between rounds. We increased. We went from 9-minute to 10-minute rounds, which actually improved the pace of play. We were able to get down to a much faster pace of play, and improve the amount of revenue that we were taking in per round. That's what I look at. It's not necessarily the number of rounds that we put out there, whether it's 34 or 35,000 rounds. It's how much revenue we take in per round. We know how much we spend per round, but it's important to us to get back a certain amount of revenue per round. So actually, we did pretty well last year. We had a slow start, but it caught up, and we did very well through September, October, and into November. So, which is in the following fiscal year, but the year before we did well. So we were in good shape there. The rink is a different animal. The rink definitely does suffer. I mean, we went from having a 15 below zero day on a Sunday this year to having 57 degrees the next day. So one day we had to close because it was too cold to have anybody up there, never mind our patrons, but staff. And then the next day it was too warm to keep the compressors couldn't keep up with the ice. So it does make an impact. Right now, it hasn't made an impact because we've been able to, and that's how we can adapt and be nimble with our budget. We've been able to really kind of cushion things on other sides and supplement and sustain through that methodology.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next item, moving away from budgets, and I apologize for the late hour. As Mr. Martineau said to me earlier, that's what I signed up for. Right? We're talking about Hubway, and just as a preface, this board voted to constitute a Hubway advisory committee to look at our participation in Hubway, see if it was sustainable, if not, well, if so, or if not, what can we do to grow the system? Does it require a change of model? Can we work within the existing model? So the committee met, I guess, what, 4 times?
4 or 5 times. Yeah.
4 or 5 times, looked at the model with the assistance of Mr. Martineau, Mr. Viola. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Martineau to explain the committee's recommendations.
Yeah, thank you. As Neil said, you know, the committee was formed at the request of staff, and the impetus for that was really twofold. The first driving force being that Alta, which was the former company that operated Hubway and several other bike share systems in the U.S., was acquired by a company called Motivate. So there was a change in ownership. Motivate entered the scene with some ideas for some short-term fixes for making the systems, all the systems that they operate, but particularly Hubway, more efficient, better day-to-day operations, and then also entered with a longer-term vision and some goals for improving the system for the long term, growing the number of stations, ridership, marketing efforts, et cetera. The other driving force behind forming the committee was the contract between the participating municipalities and what is now Motivate was set to expire this year. And so staff felt it prudent to take a step back and engage in the committee process to start talking about some of the parameters under which Brookline could or should continue to participate in Hubway, to talk about some of the operational and governance challenges that we see on a staff level, and also some opportunities for addressing those things both at the Brookline level and at the regional level. That was sort of the local process. A parallel process to that included similar discussions at the regional level between the participating communities about, you know, some of the operational and governance issues and opportunities for addressing them, and you know, what's the next iteration of the Hubway bike share system going to look like, and you know, what's the criteria for that. That process at the regional level included participation by all the communities in a RFI process, a request for information. Participating communities felt it important to solicit as much information and gather as much information as possible as we prepare to engage in an RFP process. So the RFI, not surprisingly, only yielded response from Motivate and from 8D, who actually is the software manufacturer for the stations. So that local Hubway Advisory Committee and also the regional Hubway Advisory Committee processes are coming to a head. They've culminated, and the Brookline Hubway Advisory Committee, along with staff, felt it prudent to put forth some recommendations which are outlined in the memo that you received, really in broad strokes, to give you a general sense of the direction that the committee thinks that the town should be heading at the local level, and then also some considerations for the regional level. And these recommendations will be important for both Joe and I to take back to the regional conversation, and as we start discussing more specifics around criteria and parameters for the RFP to go out for a regional operator, and bake those criteria into the RFP to the furthest extent possible, so we can make the system better, not just in Brookline, but also regionally, and improve the day-to-day operations and the long-term operability of the system as well. So That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, so one of the takeaways of the committee, which I participated in, was that okay, we're the smallest player, and the other players, Boston, Cambridge, and to a lesser extent Somerville, are growing the system, mainly using funds from sponsors, institutional sponsors, some municipal money?
In some instances, yes.
Yeah. So two sources of capital, municipal money and sponsorships, institutional sponsorships. And while perhaps we might be able to get some institutional sponsors for our version of Hubway, we don't have quite the base that, say, Boston and Cambridge has to tap. They're just of a different scale. And the way the revenue sharing model works is that as the revenue is split partially by the percentage of stations that each community has in the system. So as the other communities grow their systems and we're not, our revenue share goes down because we have a smaller percentage of stations. So from a Brookline perspective, it's not quite as sustainable. This model isn't sustainable.
It's
for us.
very complicated, and I commend you for trying to explain it because it's not an easy accounting exercise. But in a nutshell, we're operating under what's called the cost cap model, and so Motivate. The Brookline portion of the system needs to achieve a certain revenue threshold to cover basic costs, keeping the lights on, and then after that, profits are shared between Motivate and the participating municipality, and it's a 50-50 split. And so it's extremely challenging accounting because you're sharing profits and not revenues, and it's also the contracts, the way that they're set up both at the regional and at the local level. The right incentives aren't there for Motivate as a private company to really leverage their expertise as a bike share operator and to invest in the system the way that you might expect or anticipate a private business to invest in growing the system. The contracts are very prescriptive, right down to how much you will spend annually on marketing, and that's one of the most telling sound bites for me. I mean, it isn't that Motivate isn't trying to market the heck out of the system and grow ridership, but at the end of the day, they're contractually obligated to spend X amount of dollars, and so to spend anything beyond that, they're not going to see the return on investment. And so the incentives really need to be linked to Motivate and incentivizing them to want to grow and really invest in the system. And there are a lot of obstacles right now, both with respect to the regional contract and then each municipality's specific contract with the operator that it's not the right incentives, the performance metrics might not be the right ones, and so I think collectively the participating communities are taking a step back to make sure that we get it right this time, because last time when Hubway originally launched, if you recall, it was Boston first, Cambridge, Somerville, and Brookline to follow, and so there was never really a time where the communities sat down and said, these are the regional criteria and regional vision for Hubway, and this is what we think is important, and then tandem to that, each community expressing what they need or what their expectations are at the local level for the system to operate. And so that was all kind of done somewhat in a piecemeal fashion just by virtue of how the communities came to participate in the system that we have right now.
So what I guess staff and the committee is looking for is a vote of the Board of Selectmen that we participate in the RFP process with the other communities.
With these broad strokes criteria as guiding principles for Joe and I to take to the regional table.
Right.
So,
You have my vote, but I've got one clarifying question. To what extent are our interests, the Brookline interests, aligned with those of Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, the larger participants in this system? Are we sort of trying to push the other participants in a direction that doesn't benefit them, or that they're inclined to sort of head either 90 degrees or 180 degrees in the other direction?
I think in part, we're still trying to get a sense of that, and I think some of that will be flushed out at the regional level. To the extent that everybody wants the same thing, I think everybody wants a successful bike share system, and I think that Brookline is very much an important connection point. We're bound by Boston on 3 sides, and we have 4 stations, and so I think that there's a general feeling that there's a lot of opportunity that's being missed here, not just with respect to Brookline's value and increasing Brookline's value as a participant in the regional level, but also increasing the interoperability of the system within Brookline. So I think it's fair to say, or it's a safe assumption, that the majority of Brookline riders are probably riding to work or to wherever in Boston. They're not necessarily commuting within the town. So I think there's a recognition and value of Brookline as an important connection point, and also a market that isn't fully tapped. I also think that some of the other participating municipalities and their staff, they're answering to their municipal officials and stakeholders as well. So I think broad strokes, we all want the same thing. It's just a matter of sitting down and figuring out what the appropriate vehicle is to get there. So we have our regional goals, and then each municipality's specific criteria and goals as well.
We are ready for a vote?
Yeah.
I will move that we authorize staff to participate in an RFP for a hubway system operator along with other participating municipalities using criteria as recommended by the Hubway Advisory Committee. All those in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to voting last. Sorry.
The next item is talking about the statement of interest and the question of whether we should submit a statement of interest to the Mass School Building Authority for the high school expansion project. We talked about this last week, and we held a vote to see what the school committee did, because while the Board of Selectmen would be issuing technically the statement of interest, it would be upon the recommendation of the school committee. And prior to that, the advisory committee took the issue up and voted not to submit a statement of interest regarding the high school for this year. So do we have news on what the school committee did?
Yes, the school committee voted unanimously to not pursue a statement of interest at this time.
Okay, and I presume they were for the reasons similar to what the advisory committee recommended, the big ones being the timing. If we were to pursue a statement of interest, we would be pushing back a year. Plus the signals we've been getting from the MSBA were not favorable. While they didn't say no, perhaps I could characterize it as they weren't especially encouraging. Is that fair, or no?
Fair.
Okay, thank you. Going out on a limb, plus the MSBA process in and of itself would add costs. Any discussion?
No, I was convinced by that the timing, as well as the fact that we could maybe do this more I don't want to say we're going to do this. We
More
could maybe
efficiently.
more efficiently.
And with more flexibility
Yeah.
to sort of tailor a project. to
So
benefit
that would kind of overcome the fact that we wouldn't be getting 27% or whatever we might from the state.
Right. So that said, I guess we're ready for a vote. So I'll move that we do not submit a statement of interest to the Mass School Building Authority for the high school expansion project. I'm starting to lose it. All those in favor, please
Aye.
say aye. Selectman Daley, Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Selectman Heller.
Aye.
Selectman Green.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next item, question of approving a charge for the Bottled Water Committee. Selectman Green, tell us about this briefly.
Yes, this committee is the result of, as you know, referral to the Board of Selectmen by warrant Article 14 back in the May 2015 annual town meeting. The charge as drafted addresses the question of bottled water from the standpoint of how do we reduce the need and the desire to use bottled water in town. As the situation in Flint, Michigan shows, and local situation in Maynard, Massachusetts that I mentioned earlier, and situations all across this country. I mean, Flint, Michigan is not the only town, that has lead in its water problems. There are circumstances where bottled water is a necessity. Our concern is to take steps to reduce those extreme circumstances and to provide people with alternatives to bottled water where their choice of using bottled water is either based on valid concerns with the purity of their local water or based on misinformation. So the idea behind this charge is to look at a number of issues, but including issues of how do we create the infrastructure and the other opportunities for people to get off of the bottled water habit, if you want to call it that. I agree with a lot of the, I agree with a lot of the individuals who, want to take a more aggressive approach in terms of the need to, reduce to the extent possible single-serving bottled water containers. But I think we as a government have to be mindful of the fact that we are not in a position to club people into agreeing with the perfect solution to a problem. Rather, we have to, I think in this case, emphasize education and emphasize our role in providing a basis for people to get off the bottled water habit. And that's the focus of the charge as it's written. So,
Well, I was encouraged that there were some new faces who applied, so maybe this will be an entree to town government for some new folks.
Yeah. And we are a little late in getting this off the ground, but I think what we can do is to at least lay out some of the issues that will have to be taken up over a period of months and even years to address this problem. I think we are in a position to really report to town meeting something that would be very helpful and guidance in that respect. So.
Okay, so I will move that we approve the charge for the Bottled Water Committee. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. And we're going to hold the appointments until next week.
Right.
Okay. So last item is appointments to the Preservation Commission.
Mr. Chairman, the last time we took this up, we failed to show a vacancy because there was an alternate member who got promoted up. So we do have a vacancy, and we have that remaining applicant who is eligible for appointment at this time. His name is Richard Pansiera.
Aye.
All those in
Aye.
favor? Okay, very good. Mr. Pansiera will be appointed as an alternate member for a term, for a new term.
Okay, that concludes the business of the Board of Selectmen for Tuesday, March 1st. Have a great rest of the week.
Okay, they're still saying the Democratic race is too close to call in Massachusetts, but Clinton's slightly ahead.
How many places are?
It's 60% is in.
How many votes did Trump get in Brookline?
I don't know.
We know about 4.
Yeah.
That's a rhetorical question.
This was long.
Yeah.
Is that yours or mine?
I think that's mine.
Okay.
we have stuff to sign?
There was one page,
I'm gonna leave this with you again. So maybe not having to bring it because it's so heavy.
oh, it was just, it's the contract.
Okay.
So Clinton won big, though. Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, Alabama, Arkansas, and Virginia. Sanders got Vermont, Oklahoma. Sanders ahead in Colorado, but only 1% is in. So it looks like he might get Colorado, though. And,
Oklahoma?
yeah, Oklahoma, like the Renegades in Oklahoma went